From victim to savage. How I ended the school bully once and for all. Well, I threw up all over him. After that, he never messed with me again. You established dominance. I made friends in the football team. Bullies think twice when you're buddies with a 6'2", 250-pound Samoan. It's crazy how nice so many Samoans are, by the way. I challenged him to a fight at lunch, left during the period before lunch, to move 800 miles away. He tried to shove me down an embankment while on a field trip. Had I fallen, I would have broken my leg or worse, because the embankment ended about 25 feet down, then dropped off into some deep brush and trees. Anyhow, my best friend was next to me and said, "Watch it," as he came at me. I sidestepped him and he tumbled down the embankment over the edge into the brush. Fractured several ribs, dislocated his shoulder, and broke his ankle. He never did anything to me again. F you, Darren, you wimp. A group of sociopaths from my school that always tormented us followed me and my friends to my house one day in a pickup truck. They stole my friend's shoes, pushed one of them until she fell, and took my sketch pad and threw it in a puddle. My stepbrother came outside, beat one of them badly, stole his pants, and threw his keys into a sewer grating before clonking him with an empty vodka bottle. It was traumatizing for me on both ends, but that group of kids never even looked at us again. "Stepbro, what are you doing?" "Oh, okay, go ahead." Half my class beat the crap out of him. It's nice to have a lot of friends sometimes. I was bullied for my wheelchair, so I ran their feet over. I ruined their pedicure. So is that counted as attempted vehicular manslaughter? She told me that my face made her want to take action to not be alive anymore. So I told the school counselor that she had confided in me that she was going to take action not to be alive anymore. She had to explain to everyone what she really said. She'd call me fat and ugly every day. She'd also tell me I was trash because I was adopted. As in, your own mother thought you were so ugly that she didn't want you. I mean, this is a great response to her, but I don't know why this bully didn't just outright lie, instead of getting in trouble for the angle of, "I wasn't trying to self-delete, I just told her that her face made me want to self-delete." Still, I'm glad that one way or another she got caught out in her crappiness. Weirdly, became friendly with his dad, who then ripped him in front of me. It was a mad one. This guy was a typical bully, really, picking out a new target at the start of every day and stalking them, seeing how far he could take it before ripping on you for being a B-word that couldn't take being teased. His favorite was to try to take you down with a liver punch or a dead leg when you weren't paying attention. The smaller guys got it worse than anyone. Like most bullies, he used to wear people down. Everybody hated him. He was tolerated but never liked. Let's call him B. Fast forward a few years, I'm 15 and starting to get into fitness. There were a few gyms in my area, but the only one I could afford was the no-frills, broken-windows bodybuilders gym that sat on a large industrial estate. It was renowned for being a place where you'd get seriously hurt if you started to mouth off, but we just wanted to learn how to train. So one day, me and my friend walked in there like scared puppies and asked to sign up. The owner, Mark, took us around and introduced us to everyone, and from that moment on, they treated us like royalty. They loved the fact that we were taking an interest. If we were unsure of an exercise, they'd stand with us and take us through it step by step, spotting us as they talked through the anatomy of the muscles. Soon, we knew everyone. Tekken, the guy so big he looked 3D. Paulo, the guy that used to train his legs every day and had to wear chef's pants. Bry, the fellow that used to eat a Costco chicken for breakfast and one for tea. Such a mix of characters. Maybe about 6 months in, my mate goes on a holiday, and I decide to go and do a workout late one evening. I walk into the gym, and B is sitting there behind the reception desk. He was surprisingly cool with me, asking how long I'd been training and what I was planning to do that evening. After a chat, I walked into the gym and kept my head down and began my workout. I was a few sets in when I noticed him staring at me. I knew he was going to do something because he couldn't frickin' help himself. It started with pushing down on the barbell when I asked for a spot. He then thought it'd be a good idea to pull on the cables when I was doing cable crossovers. I finished my workout and accepted his invitation to go into the sauna as he had just set it up. He waited until I was in there with him and then he locked the door and took a pee on the coals. The stench was horrific. It was a brand new machine and he had really destroyed it. I heard a noise outside the sauna shed as Bry unlocked the door and pulled it open, trying to find out what was going on. He peered in before screaming at B, "I should have fricking known, you fricking idiot!" He looks at me. "Why did you get in there with this frickin' fool? Come out, mate." He then looks at B. "I'm guessing from the smell you peed on the coals, you dirty little crap bag. I'll tell you what, sit in there for 10 minutes and think about it." He then slams the door. Bry walks me through to reception and throws me a bottle of water. "Sorry about that, lad. I'm looking after the gym for a few weeks and I brought our B to work here for the evenings while I train. B's your son? I stared. He starts laughing. Yeah, he's a prick, isn't he? I hope he doesn't make my car stink of pee on the way home. A bully was making my daughter's life a misery on the bus. Instead of calling his folks or jumping on him, I did the following. I pulled him aside at the bus stop one day and asked for his help. Hey, Danny, I was hoping you could help me out. I guess there's a kid on the bus who's picking on my daughter. She's a girl and small, and I'd like for you to help protect her. If you see anything like that, could you stick up for her, please, and let me know about it? He kind of took the request with pride. He was kind of like, oh yeah, I can do that for her. I'll make sure she stays safe, kind of reply. And, well, that was the end of the bullying. Well, I hit mine with a brick, so that taught them a lesson not to F with me. I went too far. Not a bully per se, just a jerk. In my French class, there was this guy who sat behind me, who'd always kick my chair repeatedly, and I was at the point where I was visibly infuriated by this happening every lesson. The girl who sat next to me turned to him and said, "Hey, you should probably stop doing that. He looks like he's about to hit you." The guy laughed it off and said I wouldn't dare. I didn't, but I turned around and cocked my arm back. He was leaning back on the hind legs of his chair with his feet on mine, so when I did this, he flinched, fell backwards off his chair, and got a few laughs from the people behind us. He never kicked my chair again after that. I pulled a piece of hair out of her head and smacked her face against the ground. Later on, I heard she liked me, which is why she messed with me for 2 years before I'd had enough. I knew a girl like that in middle school. She made my bus rides to school and back miserable. Shoved and hit me the whole school year. Stole my sweater to wear it herself. On the last day of school, her friend handed me my sweater and a note explaining how she'd had a huge crush on me and asking me out, etc. On my walk home, I crumpled that thing up and threw it as far as I could. Some girls have some messed up ways of showing affection. I kicked him hard in the groin in the middle of history class sophomore year. He had all of the guys in our grade moo at me in the hallway when we'd changed classes. I put up with it for about a week until I snapped and started beating the crap out of him with my history book. I got him up against the wall and kicked him as hard as I could. I legit don't remember kicking him, but I remember my foot was sweaty, which snapped me out of it. The teacher made us both go into the hallway and explain what happened. So I told him everything. Surprisingly, I never got in trouble. The next year I had to sit behind him in homeroom, and one day he just randomly turned around and apologized. I apologized for kicking him, and he said he totally deserved it. Senior year, I made everyone in the class Christmas ornaments with all of our names on them, and he got all teared up when he got his. So not a bad ending. I hit him in the face with a water bottle. For some reason, I couldn't stand up for myself, but he started bugging my friend. It was after school band practice, which my mum had forced me into anyway. I already didn't want to be there. And for some reason, him teasing my friend just made me slug him full force in the face with said plastic water bottle. That got other students and the teacher involved. He didn't bug us again. Yeah, I'm not dissimilar. I have a very high tolerance to people making fun of me, and I'm likely to not even notice in the first place. A legacy of a school experience full of bullying, I suppose. I do fight back if you upset my friends and loved ones, though. Middle school. The bully challenged me to a fight after school. I told him to meet me on the soccer field, which happened to be visible from where my bus home would park. I made sure to get out of school as quickly as possible and sat on the bus so I could clearly see the field. As I expected, he never showed up. The next day at school, I announced loudly so several classmates could hear, "Jason, you never showed up for our fight. I waited there after school and you never showed up. You're a frickin' chicken." And that was the end of the bullying. I recall when I graduated elementary school and moved on to junior high school, most of the kids in my class came from a different school. As a shy outsider, I got shunned by pretty much everyone. One kid took that as an invitation to start picking on me. I probably could have just punched him, but I didn't like fighting. I did like to draw though, so I began drawing horrible cartoons depicting him as this fat, gluttonous idiot who'd inevitably end up mutilated by the end of the story. These cartoons became extremely popular in the class, and that kid ended up having a real crappy time at school. Looking back on it with adult eyes, it definitely went too far. He grew up with all of those kids, but he wasn't popular, and I think he thought bullying me would finally be his way in with them. After the cartoons, they all ended up bullying him to the point where he didn't come to school for a couple of weeks. Part of me regrets what happened, but the other half of me still feels like he got what he deserved. I guess the final lesson in all of this is that kids are just kinda buttholes. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? I grew up in a rough area. Fortunately, I was attending the same school as my older brothers who would look out for me. For a while, I'd been targeted and picked on by a particular individual, and his entourage would cackle like hyenas every time he pulled my tie, kicked my shin, or shoved me. I had no idea who these bullies were, but I was a geeky kid, so I can only assume he'd seen me as an easy target. So, after relentless bump-ins with this guy, he finally took things too far and shoved me down a long flight of stairs at the school. I was only a little hurt, but pretty shaken up, as I heard the echoes of his friends laughing and walking down the hallway. I immediately went to find my brother and asked him if he could beat up my bully. My brother walked around the school with me trying to find out where this guy would hang out at lunch. Once we found him, my brother said, "You go and you beat him up." I was pretty taken aback because I thought he'd agreed to fight him for me. Again, I was a geeky kid. I started to back out. When my brother said, "Fine, let him bully you," suddenly I was back in. But I didn't know how to fight. "I've got your back, don't worry," my brother said, trying to reassure me. So I walked up to the guy and just started hitting him, and I hit him a lot. The next thing I know, he's on all fours and the adrenaline is running through me. I'm expecting his group to retaliate and beat the crap out of me. I'm slowly starting to think this was a terrible idea, but then they just don't. They're just shocked, completely stunned. So the adrenaline is just pumping, and all I can think to blurt out is, "Kiss my shoe." Now, in my head, I'm thinking this is some movie-level all eyes on me moment, and I'm killing it. My bully on the floor looks up and says, "What?" I reply, "Kiss my frickin' shoe." Again, thinking I'm gangster. And he does. He kisses my shoe and I beeline it towards my brother. As we're walking away together, my brother was incredibly proud of me for sticking up for myself, but leans in and says, "You've really got to work on your smack talk though. Why the frick did you make him kiss your shoe?" Besides the incredible cringe crap talk, they never bothered me again. Although I still caught some crap from other bullies. I either befriended my bullies or befriended other kids who were bigger and stronger and didn't mind protecting me. In my experience, most bullies are lonely and sad. I just try to make them laugh, and that usually worked. That said, it doesn't always do, and you have to stand up for yourself sometimes. One time in elementary school, two kids who liked to bully other kids took my lunchbox and started playing monkey in the middle. I played along for a minute, running back and forth, but it just kept going. So I looked at the kid who currently had my lunchbox and said, "You, give it back, or I'm just going to come after just you. If you throw it to the other kid, I'm not going to chase after my lunchbox, I'm going to tackle you with everything I have." Both of the kids laughed. I walked over to get my lunchbox and he threw it to the other kid. So I started sprinting at the kid who had thrown it, like I said I would. He tried to run away while yelling, "I don't have it!" But I tackled him to the ground, which knocked the wind out of him. After I stood up, I looked at the other kid who had my lunchbox and he just walked over, gave it back and said, "Sorry." I played the crazy card. My cousin started dating the bully's sister, and I guess he didn't like that, so he came after me. It escalated more and more to the point we nearly threw down in the middle of class one day, but the teacher stopped us. She made me stay after class and talked me down, saying she knew he instigated it, and I wasn't the problem, but she couldn't have this exploding in her class again, which I felt was fair of her. A couple of days later, as I was getting stuff at my locker, he was standing behind me when I turned around and he slapped my books out of my hand and said, "Let's go." I rolled my eyes at him, held up a finger and just said, "Just a second." I then turned around and started hitting my head against my locker. The great thing about an empty steel locker is that you don't have to hit it very hard for it to just make a big sound. So while I was really not hitting it that hard, to him it looked and sounded like I was just wailing on it. After a few of those, I spun around and screamed at him to come at me. His eyes went wide and he just backed away slowly in front of everyone in the hallway, and never messed with me again. Hid behind a corner and punched him in the stomach. He eventually became my best friend too, so go figure. This sounds like a real junior school kind of bully situation. Literally from tears and pain both ways to being friends not too long after when you're shown that your actions the other way won't be tolerated anymore. Most bullies are just kids who don't know the right way to behave in the end. Headbutt. Broke his nose. Got expelled 2 days, but I'm really happy I did it. I don't remember him bullying anyone else after that. I didn't. I fought back, got my butt kicked, and I ran. He'd wait for me somewhere else and get my butt kicked again. I fought back successfully once, and it just made him and his friends jump me and my friends. Now he takes my sweaty towels from me at the gym, so I make sure to make them as gross as I can. It wasn't high school, but it was summer camp, and I was about 8 or 9 years old. This slightly older kid was always a huge bully, just a total D-bag for no reason. I went home and told my dad about it, and he said, "Next time he does something, punch him in the face, and if you do, I'll take you to a baseball game." Next day at camp, I was minding my own business on the 4 square line. He came up and said something, and I punched this F right in the face. He was shocked, never said one bad thing to me ever again, and let me cut him in the foursquare line in my next turn. It was actually a great life lesson on how to stand up for yourself. I didn't start going around picking on kids or needlessly beating people up, but I was never bullied again. And yes, my dad took me to a ball game. A friend of mine was being bullied at school decades ago, and after a few days of it, he stood up to the bully and said, "Listen, if you keep doing this, we're going to fight, and you might beat me, but we're going to fight again, and you're going to have to fight me every day until you leave me alone." And the kid left him alone. I had a very similar conversation with a guy I worked with one summer. He really wanted to fight me for some reason. Finally, I just said, "Look, we can go somewhere to fight where we won't get in trouble, but you need to know that my goal will be to break your ankle, leg, or foot." The guy was on a track scholarship, so once I said this, he left me alone. 2 options: have evidence and report them to the principal and admin, or beat the crap out of them. I got a guy expelled and sent to the continuation school and probably messed up his life because he stole hundreds of dollars from me over a period of 2 years in middle school. You hit them with something, from ambush, not up front. Bullies want easy prey. They avoid actual fights or victims that retaliate and escalate, generally. I told him that if he ever talked to me again, I'd stab him in the eye. It worked. He never talked to me ever again, even when I ran into him at Walmart 8 years later with my wife and son. We locked eyes for a second, and he immediately looked away and walked off in the other direction. I started rugby in grade 10, stood up to him in grade 11, and he got mad and he tried to kick me. I was almost 6 foot by then, but always tall and weak. Well, training for rugby sort of fixed that a little, so when he kicked me, I caught his foot and whoo, I let it go and it was above my head. He fell backwards and landed on the back of his head. He never talked to me again. After years of mental and sometimes physical attacks from this girl and her followers, I was depressed, angry, and occasionally had pretty concerning ideas about how to end things once and for all. She and her group were torturous to quite a few kids. I wanted her to stop. I stole a pen that was a novelty pen from her that she loved showing off. Specially made and it had her name on it. Also stole a small, sparkly journal from her backpack as well. I made sure to steal some of her homework from the trash cans occasionally. She had some writing in it. General teen girl stuff and things about how stupid she thought some people were and how easy it was to make fun of them. I practiced her handwriting for a bit, and then I wrote down a pretend kill list, with my own name at the top, plans of how each one could be done, little confessions about hurting animals and generally messed up stuff. I read a lot as a kid and I got some good motivation from many of my books. Then I wiped the cover and pen off and tucked the pen into the little spiral binding, and I left it in the basket under her desk for the teacher to find. Let's say that the school didn't believe her when she said she didn't write those things. She got expelled, which made me feel warm and fuzzy. My best buddy, Sal, was a little guy that kept getting picked on. I was one of the biggest, strongest kids in my school. My other buddy, Roy, was also one of the biggest, strongest kids in the school. One day, Roy and I waited outside a classroom for Sal and saw his bully picking on him. Roy and I had a conversation with that kid, and he walked with a limp for a week and never even talked to Sal again. So Sal just had big friends, but that worked for him. I always punched my bullies square in the nose. Sure, they might kick my butt after, but I was more than willing to dish some pain out while receiving it. After a few times, they went after targets that didn't fight back. They want easy control, and they're just as afraid of pain as you are. Every new school was another bully. You let one person walk on you, and everyone will walk on you. Either make boundaries or be a doormat. Don't be afraid of consequences. That's how bullies keep you in control. Just start swinging. Impulsively decided to revenge pants him in front of a group of 35 or so peers. His boxers came off with his pants. Bonus, he had a tiny weenie. Anytime he'd try to mess with me after that, I'd just scoff and say, well, I'd be trying to compensate for something too if mine was that tiny. Fatality. I had a bully who messed with me literally every day and made my life hell for over a year. It was documented, but school staff never acted. Had enough of getting picked on one day, so I decided I wasn't going to put up with it. He came up behind me and slammed my face into my locker. It was his modus operandi. So I turned around and I hit him. I didn't stop hitting him until he was unconscious. The track coach asked why, and I said, I had to handle the problem because you refused to. I got banned from after-school sports, but nobody ever gave me a hard time for the remainder of high school. What company is so terrible that you're boycotting them forever? StubHub, the way they handled the pandemic with changing their policies and peak pandemic so that people could only recover credit or resell their tickets instead of receiving cash for cancelled events, was ridiculous. I was forced to hold my Coachella ticket for 2 years, and then they just decided to refund everyone for this year when they realized that they'd make more money since the ticket prices will surge when the event is back in 2023. Screw StubHub. Oh, StubHub is so bad. I had the app, so I put a 2-ticket package in my cart, but when I went to check out, it had changed to 1 ticket. It was the same price, so they charged me $80 for 1 ticket when it was the same price for 2 tickets. Why did the number of tickets change once I added them to the cart? Bullcrap. So I called and complained, and of course, "There's nothing we can do about it, sir. We can't cancel the transaction." So I filed a fraud claim at my bank and got it back. Screw StubHub. Shaw Academy. Sleazy little fricks. Their lies and advertising and nearly impossible to cancel a subscription with them. Tried doing a course that was, quote, a free 4-week course. The course was free for the first 4 weeks, but the way they sold it was that the course itself was 4 weeks and free. They say you can finish a course as fast or as long as you want, but I think it actually caps out at 3 lessons a week, making you stay in the program for a few months, paying monthly. Trying to cancel is a nightmare. Sifting through pages and pages of, "Are you sure you want to cancel?" and "Here's a 5% discount," or "Fill this form out, now this one, and now this one." All to get to a phone number that's only valid to call for a couple of hours a day. When you finally get to call, it's an automated message. 10 minutes of a robot telling me it cares about me and it wants me to stay, only to finally press 2 to cancel my subscription. Frick Shaw Academy. Nestlé. I may inadvertently grab one of its products, but when I see the name, I always put it back. I keep a list of their brands on my phone because most of their stuff doesn't even say Nestlé. The ones that apply most to me are Gerber and Purina, but I also have to periodically remind myself that they own stuff like Hot Pockets and most bottled water brands as well. I only buy bottled water on road trips, but I always check the Nestlé list before I do. The same goes for Frito-Lay now too. No more Fritos, Cheetos, Doritos, Tostitos, Lays, or Ruffles. Yep, Nestlé knows that everyone knows about how bad they are now, to the point where they're actively hiding their name on all of their subordinate brands' products. It's sneaky as all heck. Expedia and all of the sites they own or control, which is a lot of them. Expedia screwed me over in a bad way, and then their customer service people insulted me when I tried to call attention to the serious issues. Ultimately, they offered me a gift card as a take-it-or-leave-it solution to the entire issue. I left it and went on a crusade to slam them on Twitter. I did it for a long time but eventually got bored. The issue? Their website lets someone use my email address to buy plane tickets. The person didn't need my password. I believe they just made a typo that resulted in them using my email address in the required field. When I got an email confirmation about my airline tickets, I called to say it was wrong. Expedia cancelled their tickets and called it settled. When the actual customer arrived at the airport and their tickets were cancelled, they called Expedia. The rep from Expedia told them I cancelled their ticket and then gave this angry person my full name and my cell phone number so that he and I could sort it out between the two of us. The guy was furious and made vague threats, so I contacted Expedia customer service to get this addressed. When I refused their offer of a $50 Expedia gift card, they told me I could suck a soft member or a throbbing hard one. My choice. I declined to do either, and we parted ways forever. And yes, it must have been illegal for them to give out my number like that, but I wasn't going to hire a lawyer and sue over it. Even if I won, it would be a pain in the crotch for minimal cash, and the lawyers would get most of it. I settled for petty online revenge, but my time is valuable, and that got old after a few years. The end. eBay. I escaped an awful relationship and was changing all of my passwords to random combinations. I set it to log out of all devices and forced the password to be re-entered. It wasn't actually doing that. I tried from multiple devices, so it wasn't a keylogger or anything that my ex was doing. I also confirmed that I'd logged out on other devices, reset password, and clicked to log out of all devices, but it just wasn't logging out of them when I clicked to do so. So my awful ex was bidding and winning auctions. So I called eBay to report the issue. They said it wasn't that my account had been hacked or fraud because I knew who was doing it. They would do nothing. They said I just had to take the bad feedback and be blacklisted, and that I should pick better partners in the future. It didn't matter that they had major security flaws. All I could do was remove the payment options from my account so that he couldn't pay for his auctions. I will never use them again. I had a non-delivery happen on my last order. I contacted the seller, who said it wasn't their fault. I contacted eBay and they wouldn't help me either. I kept contacting and finally called UPS. They said I just needed to give eBay some code from them that showed that they screwed up the delivery. When I contacted eBay about it the last time, they were like, "Oh yeah, that works. Here's your refund." Why couldn't they have told me that in the beginning? Anything that has even a hint of MLM, you've got to stop exploiting your personal relationships out of greed. MLM? You mean moms losing money? Ugh, I hate multi-level marketing. Not just because people send you predatory mail, but because they prey on vulnerable people. People who are struggling to find work, parents trying to return to work after parental leave, people who are in real need of income and willing to do anything. Then they tow them along with this idea that as long as they recruit others, they'll be okay. I know it's easy to be mad at the people sending emails or trying to get their friends to sign up, but to be honest, I just feel sorry for them and a desire to remove them from that situation. It's predatory as heck, and it encourages people to get in so deep that they can't see a way out. The Susan G. Komen Foundation. They employ alphabet soup and lawyer speak to defraud millions of people. Note that they don't fund research, nor do they help patients. They're an advertising company. They advertise cancer awareness, because apparently someone might be unaware of cancer. What the heck? Harvey Norman. They have terrible customer service and they took a whole lot of Australian government money that they didn't deserve and are refusing to give it back. Once upon a time when internet shopping was new and novel, a lot of people didn't trust it because they were afraid of providing their credit card details to the World Wide Web. It was a time when you were told, don't tell anyone online your name or where you live. However, slowly people started to adapt to buying things online as they saw the convenience of being able to make purchases and get those items delivered. More websites began getting into the online shopping space, and internet shopping started to gain momentum. People realized they could buy things online, and even with the currency conversion and shipping fees, it still worked out cheaper than buying in a traditional brick-and-mortar store. That's how much we were getting ripped off in Australia. The main drawback was back then there were long shipping times. Jerry Harvey, the multi-billionaire, started to whinge and complain that online shipping was hurting his business. He had had it good for decades ripping off the Aussie consumer, and with the advent of internet shopping, he could see his profits starting to decline. He said it was bullcrap consumers had a choice to purchase online and that there could be a warranty issue or fake products or whatever crap that spewed out of his mouth. Every Christmas period, he'd go on television and complain if sales had decreased from the previous holiday season or if there was only a slight increase in sales. If sales were good for that year, he'd be happy and say spending was up. At the time, goods and services tax was exempt for online purchases from overseas if the total was below $1,000. So one day, Jerry Harvey, the greedy grifter, decides to lobby the Australian government to reduce that threshold to $300 and say Australian businesses can't compete with overseas retailers. Somehow, buying an item online, paying currency conversion fees and international shipping still ended up cheaper, yet to hear it from him, Australian consumers aren't being ripped off. There was much public backlash to the fudgewit Jerry Harvey's proposal. Politicians scrapped the idea. Jerry complains and whinges and whines. Years later, he lobbies the government again. However, this time it's not to reduce the threshold to $300, but he wants all purchases from overseas to be liable for the global sales tax, or GST. Somehow, this time it passes. Not sure how many bribes he had to make in order to have that happen, but there you go. This is the same prick that told everyone to spend their $900 financial crisis stimulus money in 2008 on plasma screens in his stores. Every time that you make a purchase online from overseas and it's more expensive by 10%, you can thank your multi-billionaire friend Jerry Harvey. How much more money does the greedy piece of doo-doo want? I will never buy anything from a Harvey Norman store ever again. I know people that pay more for an item to avoid buying from there. I probably wouldn't even pee on Jerry Harvey if he was on fire. They had this brand when the narrator lived in that neck of the woods for a while, and yes, it was too expensive for more or less the same products that you could buy anywhere else. I'm a big proponent of brick-and-mortar stores when possible, but guys like this Harvey fellow really make that a bit harder sometimes. Comcast. I wish I had the option to use anything else. Look people, I know Starlink is a thing. Paying twice as much per month with a huge setup fee for internet that has even more frequent outages isn't exactly a good decision. Not to mention it's not even an option since I live in a huge apartment building. FedEx, as much as I can help it anyway. I obviously can't fully boycott them if it's the only delivery option on an e-commerce website or if some company happens to ship me something via FedEx, but I've literally chosen to pay more on an e-commerce website to specifically not use FedEx as a shipping service. The reason? When I bought my Pixel 3, the first day it was supposed to arrive, I worked from home that day to sign for my new package. They never arrived, and on tracking, wrote that I wasn't home to receive the package. I was furious, so I spent the next 2 days working from home and even did my work in the kitchen so that I could physically see if any delivery driver actually walked up to my door. 3 straight frickin' days in a row, not a single person comes up. My door cam doesn't even show them walking up, but they have the mother frickin' audacity to claim I wasn't home 3 straight days in a row. I ended up having to pick it up at their facility, just because they lied 3 times in a row even after a phone call each day the first 2 days. The customer service person even told me that I probably missed them when I went to the restroom or something. Can't even own up to the frickin' fact that everybody in their company was a bunch of frickin' liars. So for that reason alone, I pay more for shipping as long as it's not FedEx. I've specifically driven a further distance to get something printed at Staples or Office Depot just so I don't step foot in a FedEx store. Boycotting FedEx until the day I die. This is too late for you, but maybe it can help someone else. FedEx did the exact same thing to me, but I was able to get my package within a few hours. I work from home and I was expecting my new iPhone, which was rush shipped for early morning delivery. I put a note for the driver on my door that said I was home and to knock. I kept refreshing the tracking info until finally it said a delivery was attempted, but I wasn't home. I called the customer service line and sat on hold for 45 minutes before reaching a series of people who kept passing me off to someone else. Finally, I ended up with a very nice woman who was honest as F with me. Told me she was looking at his location and he scanned the package miles and miles away from my house. She called someone at the local dispatch who was able to get in touch with the driver and have him drive across the city to get my package to me. I left the note on my door just to mess with him and yep, he was angry. How dare you hold him accountable and make him do his job? You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? I was boycotting Blockbuster for charging me late fees because they lost the tape I returned in their evening return slot. Screw those guys, they aren't getting my business. You sure showed them. They only have 1 store left. So what you're saying is, the job's not done yet. I used to live in an apartment next door to a pizza place. The pizza was decent, so I went there at least once a week. There was a woman who worked there who usually wasn't the most friendly, but I never really had an issue. I wasn't the chatty type, but I was a regular, so I'm pretty sure all the employees recognized me. One time though, I walk in and it's her and another employee working there. The woman is in the back, so I order my usual 2 slices with the other employee, who puts them in the oven and stands by the counter watching TV to wait. A minute later, the woman comes in on the phone and asks me, "Did you order?" I said, "Yeah, I just got 2 slices." For some reason, she assumed the other employee hadn't done anything, so she puts 2 more slices in the oven. I wasn't really paying attention, so I didn't think anything of it. A minute later, the other employee walks back in, takes the 2 slices she put in for me, and boxes them up. That's when the woman realizes what had happened, I still hadn't realized by the way, and completely loses her mind at me. She starts screaming, "Why didn't you say your slices were already in there? Now I just wasted these," and dramatically dumps them in the trash. "What's wrong with you?" The whole place goes dead silent and everyone is just staring at me. I'm just standing there bewildered and trying to make sense of what had just happened, so I just blurt out, "Sorry," and walk out. As the shock wore off, I replayed the events in my head, realizing that I didn't really do anything wrong, or at worst, it was just an honest misunderstanding. I got pretty upset that I got yelled at like a child, especially after being a regular for years. At that moment, I decided that I'm never stepping foot in that pizza place ever again. And I didn't. I lived next to it for another 3 years and not once went in or even ordered from it. Pretty much anything in one of those unskippable YouTube ads. State Farm. Thanks to some whistleblowers, they got busted committing fraud against their customers and the federal government after Hurricane Katrina. They told their claims adjusters to classify damage as flood damage rather than wind damage so that they could reject the claim and tell customers to file a federal flood insurance claim. Katrina survivor here had a $250K policy. I had to sue them due to non-payment to only end up with $20K. I hate the insurance industry with a passion. Lifetime Fitness. It really pains me to write this because I really love their gyms actually. I had a membership of Lifetime on and off through college. I went to a large university with great amenities, so I didn't need the membership during the school year. I tried to cancel at the end of one summer. I was at the gym one day and I asked about the cancellation. I was told to come back at a certain time frame the following Wednesday to cancel, so I complied. When I showed up, "Oh, sorry, the person doing the cancellations isn't here." I was told to return the following Wednesday. Surprise, surprise, the person wasn't there yet again. I told them I was going to stop the payments through the credit card company, and they responded by telling me that they'd take me to collections then. I ended up escalating through their corporate offices to get the membership cancelled. They managed to get 2 extra months out of me. After that year of college, I shifted over to LA Fitness and maintained that membership for about 10 years. When I moved away from LA Fitness, I joined the YMCA, where I've been for the last 5 or 6 years. I'll always have a gym membership in my lifetime, but I'm committed to not joining a Lifetime Fitness again until I'm reimbursed. It's really a loss for both of us. If you're between gyms, I do encourage you to check out your local YMCA. YMCAs are unique in that their membership cost structure is designed to subsidize memberships for individuals and families that otherwise couldn't afford one. They also tend to be active in the community, hosting events like the Special Olympics. Look, if you're going to buy a membership to a place that you're going to constantly torture yourself for not going to enough, do yourself the favor of Googling the prices and reviews of the gyms around you. Even if the price looks enticing, these places can really screw you for a while if their owners are sleazy. And sadly enough, there seem to be a lot of these in the business. This video is not brought to you by the YMCA. I've been boycotting Carnival Cruise Line ever since I found out they're dumping plastic into the Bahamas. They even admitted it and received a $20 million fine. Sirius XM Radio. If you've ever dealt with the customer service when trying to cancel your subscription, you'll also understand why. Also, they'll straight up renew your subscription at 1,000 times the price and fight tooth and nail to not refund you. And they'll bombard you with mail and email and texts for the next 10 years. Screw them. Yelp. They're terrible to small businesses and require them to pay a fortune for ads to bury any negative reviews. If the business doesn't spend on ads, they bury the positive reviews. Yelp also seems to attract the worst critics. PetSmart. My aunt works there and said she's surprised that every animal in there hasn't died yet. Multi-level marketing schemes. They're crap companies that attract crappy and sometimes desperate people and train them on how to profit off of their friends and families. They destroy lives, and I refuse to support them. Caskets, headstones, and burial plots. Facebook. If you're doing it, make sure you also boycott the other apps and services they own, including Instagram and WhatsApp. Microtransactions in games that are only there to speed up ridiculously slow progression models. EA Sports because they ruined my favorite video game genre. I haven't given them a dime since 2017, and I'm not planning on doing so anytime soon. Walmart. I worked there, and I hate it with a passion. I work for Walmart, and I'll only shop there if I have to. The 10% discount I get from working at the DC doesn't even apply to half the stuff in the store. Yesterday, me and some friends went to get groceries on our camping trip and got $6.11 off of our $124 bill. Even if you take out the case of alcohol, $6.11 isn't 10% of $110. I wish I could boycott or avoid those stupid Huel adverts with that grinning idiot in the hat. Hugh, thanks Huel, I've more energy than my 20s. So whack. The Oscars. Screw the Oscars. That Hollywood back-scratching circle has absolutely no business telling anyone what cinema is. 2017 Boss Baby got nominated for Best Animated Feature, but Your Name didn't? Excuse me, what the frick? Then 30-plus people die in an arson attack on an animation studio in Japan, and not so much as a single word during the remembrance section. If that happened to Pixar, they would have given them a full-on 20-minute segment. It's a confirmed fact that the animated feature category at the Oscars is seen as a joke. The jury literally doesn't watch the nominees, they just automatically vote for Pixar or the most famous movie. This isn't even a joke. At the awards where Song of the Sea was nominated for Best Animated Feature, and everyone thought it would win, the jury explicitly admitted they didn't watch Song of the Sea. One of the jurors even said that he didn't watch it because he didn't watch Chinese crap, even though Song of the Sea was 100% an Irish production. The studio which created Song of the Sea has also made 2 other films which were predicted to win and were also snubbed: Secret of Kells and Wolfwalkers. After Wolfwalkers, if I were a director, I'd honestly just reject any further nominations until they get a jury that actually likes to watch animated movies. Any company or brand that puts advertisements on boat billboards that trawl the beach and mess up my horizon line. That is not a fair spot to try to capture my attention. Imagine, you emerge from the Perez Art Museum, Miami, to take a bayfront stroll, only to be confronted by a jumbo screen advertisement for Senor Frogs cruising through the water. You were contemplating sculpture, now you're just blinking at a 12-foot-tall person who's dancing and eating burritos. Your attempt to enjoy a scenic view has been scuttled by a floating billboard. Hoping to escape crass commercialism at the beach? Forget it. Whether you're sitting on the sand or wading in the ocean, it's impossible not to notice the barge chugging back and forth parallel to shore. Its cargo is a 46-foot-long double-sided LED sign displaying a loop of ads for beer, sportswear, nightclubs, cell phones, airlines, TV shows, restaurants, and ice cream. Ire and jokes aside, the floating billboards aren't going away. In fact, they're so popular with advertisers that Ballyhoo Media, the Miami company that invented the innovative outdoor consumer marketing platform, has plans to expand to new cities and add special events, such as a Miami beachfront screening of Jaws this summer during Discovery Channel's Shark Week. Just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water, more ads. BP Gas. How they handled the Gulf oil spill and then acted like frickin' children about violations made me so angry. One guy literally told the judges that everyone does it when asked why they didn't follow the guidelines. What teen movie hits different when you're older and made you side with the adult later on in life? Sadly, The Wonder Years. I always couldn't believe that dad was real with his angry attitude from work. Now I understand. I may be a year or two older than Fred Savage or Kevin Arnold, and I look a ton like him at that age. So he was like a weird alter ego when the show was originally airing. Now I'm married with 2 kids, and my first reaction to anything is the dad's go-to line. How much is it going to cost me? Metamorphosis complete. I watched 16 Candles recently, and I now do not approve of Samantha going anywhere near Jake Ryan. The movie Juno. Jennifer Garner's character is at first portrayed as a square, and then you realize she's a mature adult and her husband is the man-baby. Her performance is so beautiful in that movie. You can practically see her personal shame, her disappointment with a lot of her husband's ways, and her force of will in trying to keep these feelings under wraps. I always used to think she was uptight or a square, but now I see it's only due to the stress of what her life is and the need to present stability to the world. I'm not sure how much of that was me reaching, but that's what I got out of her performance now. The stress of knowing that a single wrong move can end your dreams of a child, or not even a wrong move, but the whim of a teenager. Although, of course, it was Juno's right to decide. Father of the Bride. Watching it as a kid, Steve Martin seemed like an old grump. Rewatching it as an adult, holy crap, he is the only sane person in that movie. Winnie the Pooh. Rabbit was never against playtime, but can you just not do it in his house or garden, you little hellions? And Pooh is some frat boy who eats all of Rabbit's frickin' honey. Rabbit hardly complains, oh my gosh. And then Pooh gets his fat butt stuck in the door, and the whole village or whatever has to help him out. Rewatching Scrubs, I realize I'm no longer a JD. I've become a Cox. I don't know that many people who liked the show actively thought of JD as their favorite character or anything, but he probably represents more people in real life than Cox does. I mean, I love Cox, he's a terrific character, but he would likely treat me with much more derision than he gives Zach Braff, because he secretly actually likes JD. The Lion King. I thought Zazu was just an old fun killer. What do you mean Simba can't be king? Why would he prevent the kids from going where they want? As an adult and father, I'm 100% Team Zazu. American Pie. As a new father, I hope to be like Jim's dad when my little one is a teenager. Caring, loving, and a complete embarrassment to them. He literally walked in on his son doing the deed with an apple pie on the kitchen table. What was his reaction? We'll just tell your mother we ate it all. He not only was chill about it, but covered for him. Has to go to the hospital after his son gets his hands glued to his groin in an adult film tape. Remains chill. Has to console his son after shaving his downstairs hair all over his expensive wedding cake. Remains chill. He is a frickin' bro. The mum in Ice Princess. So you have a daughter who has a talent for and seems to like physics and has a shot of getting into Harvard. This girl throws it away for ice skating, where she's only been competing for less than a year, where if she gets injured, she's done, and when she reaches 30, she's pretty much done anyway. There's no way she's at an Olympic level at that point, and she'd need years of training. Not to mention, she tries to get into it about 10 years later than she should have in order to train. Based on the reality of the competition she's up against, this was way more likely to fail than succeed. Heck yes, I'd advise against it as well. Goob. Meet the Robinsons. Okay, this one isn't teen or child, but Family Guy. I used to think Peter was hilarious. Now I'm older, the scenes where Lois seems 100% done with his shenanigans and where Stewie once said, "Emotionally, Mom has already left you." I mean, I feel so awful for her. She got saddled with a man-child with the IQ of a lemur with brain damage who constantly undermines and undervalues her. Hell, every TV nag deserves better. Squidward do be making some good points. If I saw two idiots giggling in a cardboard box outside my house, I'd call the police. If I had an annoying coworker who was also my neighbor who also destroyed my house, intentionally annoyed me, and brought in a friend to make my life pure misery, I'd also be a bit sour. Mr. Wilson in Dennis the Menace. Seriously, screw that little miscreant and his parents that turn a blind eye to his shenanigans. Like, the Menace is literally part of his name and title. Though I did find it funny, but that's kind of irrelevant to anyone being a good person or who I align with. Hank from King of the Hill. I find myself saying, that's asinine more and more with each passing year. Why would anybody do substances where they could just mow their lawn? King of the Hill, while being super 90s, is honestly timeless. I rewatch that show every few years, and most of the lessons taught in the show stand the test of time today. Hank is similar to Red Foreman from that 70s show, where he represents a dad just trying to understand his son, who's from a different generation and upbringing than his own. Hank's a lot better and more tolerant than Red in my opinion, but that kind of generational difference and adapting to them will always be around. In Dirty Dancing, Jerry Orbach just wanted to have a family summer vacation, and instead learned entirely too much about his daughter's bedroom lives. Gene Wilder in the original Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Stop, don't, come back. I don't necessarily identify with him, but from the out I knew he was the good guy, especially when he was such a wrathful angel, smiting the wicked and rewarding the good, and Grandpa Joe too for some reason. Diary of a Wimpy Kid. Bro, your mum just wants to stop being a housewife and have a job, and you complain that she isn't in the house anymore to be your personal slave? When you get home from school, you don't even greet her, you just give her your backpack, you little crap. Do one thing in your life, you frickin' donkey. Did you ever thank her for anything, Gregory? Dr. Doofenshmirtz. He's just trying to do something right and being a good dad. It sounds blasphemous to say about a movie I dearly love, and it's pushing the definition of teen, but Animal House. If you've got a fraternity destroying a campus and members that are flunking out, the dean has to do something. And when he tells Flounder, "Fat, drunk, and stupid is no way to go through life, son," well, he actually sounds concerned, and that's good advice. The Julia Louise-Dreyfus character and her husband in Christmas Vacation. Every day, my wife and I are slowly turning into them. I'm gonna say Daria. I used to be a disaffected teen too. All my problems were so huge, and Daria's parents just didn't understand. I watch it now, and Jake Morgendorfer is who I identify with best. He's supposed to seem silly and crazy and out of touch, but now I just see a guy who worries so much about providing for his family, dealing with insecurity about his masculinity, and trying to relate to his daughters any way he can, in spite of being completely baffled by them, because his hypermasculine upbringing left him ill-equipped to relate to girls. Poor Jake. He just wants to be a better dad than his dad, and in spite of his goofiness, I think he does an okay job. Rugrats. The parents were so young and just doing their best. I like that it was a group of neighbors that were best friends as well. I get really stressed out on their behalf now, especially the one where Dee Dee just wants to make it home before her banana tree she bought died in the car, but no one could get their crap together. I don't feel like the character of the parents was ever in doubt in those films or series. Even though they're all very different people, they're all very loving caregivers in their own different ways, and they respond with a lot of grace to the challenges of their little ankle biters. Chucky's dad is especially wonderful. Mr. Mosby from Sweet Life. Dude's got it rough. He's just trying to run a hotel, but these kids are hell-bent on sabotaging everything. And to make matters worse, they live there, so it's a daily occurrence. He was also made London's babysitter for so many years. Don't think that's what he imagined when he started working there. I can still hear London saying Prindle to this day. Damn, Mr. Mosby had a tough job. Ariel's dad. That line with her saying, "I'm not a child," or something along that. It kills me now. I agree with the dad, since she's still a teen and a young one at that. Look, I don't agree with King Triton on his actions of how he handled that situation, but more just that one statement of him and her fighting about her being a child. I admit as an adult it's infuriating when a kid actually says it, and it's frustrating because you know you've also been there, and they just don't have a way to know better. But that one scene was probably the moment I realized my childhood was over, when I agreed she is in fact a child. Twilight. Poor Charlie Swan. The guy was trying so hard to connect with his daughter after years of being apart. At some point he must have realized that she was only sticking around in Forks because of some guy, and not because she wanted to be there with her dad. That would sting, especially considering he was on his own. When I was younger, I rooted for Jim's shenanigans in the office. The older I get, the more I relate to Stanley and how he just wants to bide his time until retirement. Same here. I used to think I was a Pam. Turns out, now I'm a little older, I'm a Phyllis. And I realized I'm a Meredith. Oh, don't feel bad. I'm pretty sure I'm a Toby. Dirty Dancing. The dad was completely justified in not wanting his teenaged daughter to fraternize with a creepy adult male camp dance teacher. Miss Doubtfire, but relating more with Miranda than Daniel. As a kid, I didn't understand why she lost her mind when she came home to the petting zoo. The principal and the teacher in Mean Girls. They were just trying to do their damn jobs. I like that they were both competent, reliable, and nice adults and not just reduced to some ridiculous stereotype. A lot of older teen movies do that. Pitch Perfect. Anna Kendrick's dad is like, "Hey sweetie, excited to get your college degree completely free of charge?" "Dad, you suck. I'm gonna drop out of college and become a famous music producer." Okay, cool plan. How about you do that after you get your free college education? You can even study music there." "No, I want to drop out now. I'm gonna make it. You'll see." You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? 10 Things I Hate About You. When the dad says, "You're 18, you don't even know what you want, and you won't know what you want till you're 45, and even if you get it, you'll be too old to use it." At the start, you think he's over the top and nuts. But then you learn his wife left him with 2 daughters who are now going through high school, working a stressful job to care for them, and worried about them constantly. What if they leave him too? What if they get knocked up by a boy and he never sees them again? The guy is stressed. He does ease up a little bit at the end. It's hard for him to let his daughters make their own decisions because he wants to keep them safe. And yes, they're young and most 18-year-olds don't know what they want. It gets funnier, sadder, and more relatable with every passing year. Mrs. Doubtfire. Miranda came home from work only to find her deadbeat husband hosting a party with wild animals in her home. During the divorce, he claimed he was unemployable. Then he dressed up like a woman with a professional makeup and costume and watched their kids secretly and tried to kill her new boyfriend. Yep, especially when she's talking about how she can never be fun because he's so over-the-top fun. Read silly and irresponsible. There can't be 2 fun parents in the house. Somebody needs to make sure the family don't live in squalor and that the kids are doing their homework and don't have head lice and the bills are getting paid. Although, I will criticize her new boyfriend a little. What kind of maniac orders jambalaya when they're allergic to cayenne pepper? Just rewatched a Goofy movie as an adult. Goofy just wanted to spend time with his kids. That was the whole conflict. Just go fishing with your dad, Max. You and Roxanne are breaking up before the sequel anyway. Even though I understood Max's frustrations in this movie, it was hard to watch how he spoke to him sometimes. He had no idea how lucky he was to have a father like Goofy, who's at least trying to bond and relate to him. I wanted to plug one more Disney film you all need to watch as adults, Recess the movie. Principal Prickly legit had me in tears, you guys. Twilight New Moon. As a 12-year-old, Edward's abandonment of Bella was regrettable but understandable. As an adult, I don't understand why anyone involved thought it was a good idea, and I'm angry that Carlisle and Esme did nothing to stop their perpetually frozen at 17-year-old son from being so stupid. I guess Edward will always have the mind of a 17-year-old. He'll be forever stuck in that not quite grown-up state of mind. He should never have been allowed to make that decision. Lilo and Stitch. My opinion of Nani changed recently. I think it helps when you realize that she's literally a teenager, 18, trying to prevent Child Protection Services from taking away the only family she has, while working and trying to be a mother to a little sister who's a social outcast. That's rough. She worked so hard for her and even gave up her dreams to take care of her. Where's she on the Disney princess list, huh? Alright, not a movie, but Malcolm in the Middle. I used to think Lois was a horrible mother who overreacted about everything. Now that I'm older, I can see that she's just an overworked, working-class mother with 5 terribly behaved boys. This is an interesting one, because Hal and Lois are far from the perfect parents. But yeah, you have to admit that their situation is basically untenable, and they're honestly just doing their best to get by in a very realistic working-class America. And those kids are feral. Hal and Lois do the best they can with the time they have, even if they lose their minds sometimes. I still can't agree with Lois killing Malcolm's scholarship, though. This part wasn't even included in the movies, but in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, there's one particular dialogue by Hogwarts' most loathed principal, Phineas Nigellus Black, which resonates with me till date. Young people are so infernally convinced that they're absolutely right about everything. Has it not occurred to you, my poor puffed-up popinjay, that there might be an excellent reason why the headmaster of Hogwarts is not confiding every tiny detail of his plans to you? Have you never paused, while feeling hard done by, to note that following Dumbledore's orders has never yet led you into harm? No, like all young people, you're quite sure that you alone feel and think. You alone recognize danger, and you alone are the only one clever enough to realize what the Dark Lord may be planning. Rewatching The Simpsons and realizing I no longer relate to Bart, I'm now Homer. I'm relating with Mo Sizlak more and more every year, and I'm scared. It's not specifically a teen movie, but I did watch it as a teen, so get off my lawn. Top Gun. Maverick is the jerk who can't follow the rules and gets his best friend killed, yet Iceman is apparently the villain for not getting up to hijinks and having an alive co-pilot. Harry Potter. I used to think Hermione was my role model. Now that I'm working as a school counselor, my role model is McGonagall. Do your homework, Charlie Brown. I have an opposite example. Never Been Kissed. All of the adults are sick weirdos. That newspaper editor is one sick weirdo to send an adult woman back to high school to spy on teenage activities. Josie, ever the weird nerd, invites her loser brother to pose as a student and make her cool. Both of them end up with teenage dates to prom. And what about that extra sick weirdo coach that hires her brother Rob to be a coach after they found out he was posing as a teenager and hooking up with a 16-year-old? Real gross, Josie Grossi. This is one of the many reasons Calvin and Hobbes is so great. You read it at 7, you see yourself in Calvin. Read it at 17, you see yourself in Hobbes. Read it at 30, and you see yourself in the parents. And it works phenomenally well on all of those levels. Bert from Sesame Street. The guy just wants to read a book and get some sleep. Revenge of the Sith, with the adult being Obi-Wan since he was the only actually mature and reasonable person in apparently the entire galaxy. While everyone else was out playing Game of Thrones and deposed the Chancellor, he was capturing a war criminal and freeing prisoners of war. Then he got called in to clean up Anakin's mess. And once Obi-Wan got back and found out what had been going on, he was gobsmacked. Like, I've been out here trying to rescue people and track down an evil general, and you guys are out here getting pregnant and hanging out with a Sith Lord. And what the heck were the Jedi Masters all doing? The dark side clouds everything. Difficult to see, the future is. No crap. Twilight. Charlie was trying so hard to keep Bella comfortable, all while having to deal with a lot of weird stuff happening around the city with little to no real information. That 70s Show and Red Foreman. The older I get, the more I realize that teenagers really do need a foot in their butt. Growing up, I hated Red for being an unreasonable tyrant who couldn't even listen to Eric's side of the story. I rewatched the series last year and that man is a saint. Despite barely being able to feed his family, he agrees to take in an abandoned child. Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Still maintain it's a great show, but as a teenager I thought the mother was just so annoying, because Buffy had to save the world. But now I'm like, damn, her 16-year-old daughter is leaving at all hours of the night and telling her that she's got important crap to do? Yeah, no. You're staying home and also probably going to a psychologist. Also, if my 16-year-old daughter was chosen to be a vampire slayer, I'd go to the Shadow Men and the Watchers Council and be like, take these frickin' powers away from her now because she's not going to be slaying any demons. She's a child. Thank you. Regular show. I remember how much I hated Benson for being a raging old man most of the time. Then as I grew up, I realized that if I had a job like him and had workers like Mordecai and Rigby, I'd probably lose my mind too. Frozen. Elsa only has 3 years on Anna, who's 18, and yet she still knows that marrying someone you just met is a bad idea. In Hook, when Captain Hook is trying to make Peter Pan's kids love him and hate their parents, he says, "Your mother reads to you every night in order to stupefy you to sleep so that she and Daddy can sit down for 3 minutes without you and your mindless, inexhaustible, unstoppable, repetitive demands. He took my toy. She hid my bear. I want to potty. I want a cookie. I want to stay up. I want. Me, mine, now. Can't you understand, child? They tell you stories to shut you up and conk you out. Before you were born, your parents would stay up all night together just to see the sunrise. Before you were born, they were happier. Watching this as a kid, I was like, oh, Hook is a villainous monster. And now that I have kids, I'm like, Hook's just dropping truth bombs, saying what all parents think but never say. I mean, I don't know that he's a character anyone would side with. Most parents love their kids despite this impact on their lives anyway. I don't have any kids and I already want to go to bed at 10 p.m, so I can't imagine resenting them for not letting me stay up all night anymore. Although maybe I'll start resenting them for the opposite. Tom and Jerry. It's all fun and games until you wake up one day and realize Jerry was such a POS. Ugh, welcome to adulthood. Not quite the same, but in a similar vein, I don't think it's possible for kids to truly appreciate how amazing the Little Prince is until they're adults. None of the statements can truly be properly felt without a few decades of bumps and bruises from life to give you the proper context to understand how profound they are. It's ostensibly a kid's book, but really, it's a book for adults. On Home Improvement, I didn't like Jill Taylor, Tim's wife, but I watched it again fairly recently and realized she was the only one keeping stuff from falling apart. She was a personification of underappreciated mothers and wives. Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. I read that book as a 6-year-old and thought how all of the adults are so stupid for not listening to Harry and trying to stop him from investigating. As I reread the book a few years ago, I realized that Quirrell Mort's plan was doomed from the beginning, and Dumbledore had everything under control. Harry did nothing except endanger himself and his friends. I'm 35 and teen movies from the 80s seem to be the worst offenders. I can't stand the concept of Ferris Bueller as a person. Also, as a huge fantasy fan, I'm starting to agree more and more with the wise wizards, teachers, professors and stuff that are like, hey protagonist, just chill and learn some stuff instead. Maybe not a teen movie, but the dad from the movie Beethoven. That dog was a goddamn menace, terrorized this guy every day, and no one else is taking care of it but him. He's constantly cleaning up after the dog, walking it, and it's controlling his life, just like he said it would. What are the dumbest mindsets that are still ruining lives in 2025? How about that climate change isn't just weather? Just because it's minus 10 degrees, that doesn't mean it's a hoax. Some people think that just because a person looks normal, they don't have a disability and must be lying. That if you get called out for your crap, that everyone else is just a hater. That if I change my mind or opinion about something, I'm being fake or phony. I can't change anything, so I'm not going to try it. That if you don't like someone, you must just be jealous. Also, the things you don't like about other people are the things you don't like about yourself. It's true sometimes, but some people treat this as an absolute rule of life. No days off. Look, sometimes you need a mental health day or a break, and people make it sound like if you don't work yourself into the ground, then you won't be successful. Successful people know when to recharge. It's just an annoying mindset. Alcoholism being romanticized. Nope, it's pretty terrible to be honest. I feel like crap today. I want to stop drinking, but I know that I'm going to drink more. The Stop Drinking Reddit is a great place, by the way. Come visit, it has helped me a bit. That you need to stay in contact with all of your family members, even though some of them are incredibly toxic. I cut ties with my mum about a year ago, but I'm too afraid to talk about it for fear of being judged or the social stigma around it. That being said, my life is much less stressful and I still think it was the right choice. I'm being persecuted when I'm contradicted. My daughter would loudly protest, "Stop yelling at me," when I would calmly tell her things she didn't want to hear. She grew out of it, but some people never do. That my opinion is as good as your evidence. The concept that both fault and responsibility can only be 100% or 0%, and that if somebody else has some fault, it absolves another of all responsibility. Just because I'm young, it doesn't mean I don't need sufficient sleep. Just because I'm young, it doesn't mean I spend all of my money recklessly and need to work overtime every weekend. Just because I'm young, it doesn't mean I don't want to relax at home on my time off. I hear a lot of crap at work because I work with mostly older people. I budget my money wisely, and in a sense, I also budget my time. Apparently those concepts are hard to understand. I feel you so hard. An older retired person once told me at the street, I was just sitting there on some stairs eating a bagel, that I was the scum that needs to be gotten rid of. Because I'm young and yet sitting there eating and not working full time. I was 17 at the time, not even an adult. Granted, my beard made me look like a 25-year-old, but still. Sorry we weren't in factories by 7 years old like back in your days, you geriatric F. At least in the first case, I'm pretty sure your workmates are mostly projecting based on how they behaved when they were younger. As for that older guy, who knows? Maybe he really was just bitter that you weren't working in a mine like he had to be. Speaking of, people who oppose good things because I struggled through it and so should you. Instead of thinking, oh good, nobody should have to go through that if possible. I'm currently struggling with a difficult and fussy baby. My mum refuses me any sympathy because apparently as a baby of 30 plus years ago, I made the selfish, conscious choice to be less than easy myself. I mean, apparently I was cheating at parenting by using earplugs in those situations. Lessening the sound of a screaming baby by 30 decibels is a godsend. People who expect everything instantly. Patience is a virtue. You're not going to die if you have to wait in line. That if you don't post about a tragedy or support something on social media, you're okay with it or don't support or care about said something. Absolute cancer. If something doesn't work 100% of the time, it isn't worth doing. People use this as an excuse to never do anything, or to deny others from trying. It's frustrating and it's holding us back as a species. I read about it on the internet and therefore it's true. My grandma does this all the time to prove her argument, and it always ends up being from some BuzzFeed article. Drives me frickin' nuts. Or people will cherry-pick quotes and not include the contradictory or explanatory evidence in the next sentence. Quitting is only for losers. If you try something and don't like it, why would you keep doing it? Why not allow yourself to switch to a better major or try a different sport or get a new job? I mean, don't quit everything at once, anytime it gets hard, but why stay miserable for a quitters never win mentality? Get a job that you like, do an activity you like. I really don't mean quit the second you struggle, guys. I do mean knowing when to quit, knowing when to go on to better things. As an example in my own life, I changed majors when I saw how miserable the future seemed to me and how badly I was struggling. The switch was the best decision I ever made. It took me too long to not see it as quitting anymore, but moving on. If you're not 100% with us, you're 100% against us. You're actually entitled to speak your mind. You're not entitled to have people listen, comply, or care, though. There's this whole work culture expectation now of always being reachable by email or text for whatever happens. A lot of places expect and at times demand that you be pretty much on call even when you're not at the office anymore. I worked at an ad agency where days off sometimes didn't even feel like that, because I'd still be getting emails about things and was expected to be checking them. I hated it. There should be some level of balance between work and personal life, and I feel like that's fading because so many places are adapting this type of culture and mentality, especially startups. This mentality of older people in industries refusing to train or teach younger people, then complaining when younger people don't know what they're doing. I deal with this constantly at work. I'm a young guy in my industry and I'm the exception to the norm. Most fire investigators are older guys. They constantly ask me why there aren't more young fire investigators, and I always tell them the same thing. Because you guys made it so difficult to get into the industry by requiring certifications that require 5 years experience to get. They require 2 court testimonies as well, and so on that basis, nobody can get into the industry. Then if somebody does manage to break in, you guys treat them like crap, refuse to help them, and refuse to teach them what they need to know. There's a ton of critical industries in the United States that are going to have issues because the barriers to getting into the industry are so high, and those already in it are so elitist that there's going to be nobody who knows what they're doing left to continue the work. It's a major problem. Teach young people, bring them in, show them the ways. Don't be a bullying jerk while you're doing it either. Butt-in-seat mentality at white-collar office-type jobs. If you do your job at a computer, there's no reason you shouldn't be able to work from home. Then, attendance isn't as important as just getting work done. And it eliminates the need for commuting, which eases traffic and pollution. Reading through other people's comments, I see that there's a lot of people saying that they'd be less productive because of distractions or whatever, and to that I say I totally agree. I don't work in an office. My wife does, which is where this complaint came from. But if I did, I would personally benefit from having oversight and a lack of distractions. I think the main point I'm trying to make is not that it should be for everyone, but that it should be a valid option for those that would benefit from it. I think even that many people would significantly reduce traffic and facility costs. Also, I don't claim to know how policies like that are enforced, but I think if your manager is actually doing their job, then they should be able to tell who's actually getting work done and who is slacking off. The customer is always right. I worked at a pizza place where my boss, the owner, took customer service very seriously, and he used to say, "The customer is always stupid." The thing is, he didn't say it in a mean way. He meant that if you treat customers as stupid people, and you have the capacity for empathy, you can usually find a way to give them what they're actually looking for, because half the time, they don't really know what they want. I really took that to heart. If you don't listen to every song or know everything about a band, then you're not a real fan. I developed the formula, I'm not a huge fan, but I like him or her or it or them, and it works so far. Stop comparing traumas. It's not a frickin' competition. Learn to have empathy and take care of each other's mental health. Assuming that people aren't allowed to change their opinions or values over time, and judging people, famous or not, for the comments made decades ago. Yes, some people have patterns of problematic comments and behavior and shouldn't be ignored. But it also makes sense that, for example, a politician might have learned about birth control or healthcare or what have you and be able to change their stance. We're not the same people at 25 and 50. Broadcasting everything in social media. I've cut way back on my social media presence. There's absolutely no reason why everyone that I've ever met throughout my life needs to know every detail of everything that's going on in my life. How dare you? It's of vital importance to me to know what Debbie, my supermarket cashier's girlfriend, had for brunch on her Instagram every day. Suggesting otherwise is something I can't even envision. That if a person doesn't immediately text you back, then they don't love you. I've seen people cry over, "Well, I texted him within 20 minutes of him texting me, and it's been 21 minutes and he hasn't texted me back yet. We're breaking up." I've even had fallouts with friends because I had to stop texting to drive or go to class. I understand it's from anxiety. I have clinical anxiety, and I understand to a point, but it is extremely anxiety-causing to have to monitor all your text back times and frequencies so that the other person doesn't throw your entire relationship away over not texting back fast enough. It's ridiculous, and I'm so tired of it. Let people have a life outside of you. Their life doesn't have to be 10,000% dedicated to you for them to truly love you. Sometimes the best thing you can have in a relationship, any relationship, is a mutual respect of privacy and time. Don't feel bad if you did this too when you were younger. I did it as well, and we were all just doing what our peers told us was the right etiquette. The fact that you grew and learned means you're doing better. That anything but perfection is a failure. Progress is often incremental and takes time. When people post their opinion about something on social media, and then they say they don't want a debate, people who disagree will be unfriended. I usually just save them the step and delete them myself, but it still freaks me out that people are unwilling to disagree or discuss or learn. My wife heard somebody do this in person at a conference talk. They stood up to give their talk and started by saying, "You're free to criticize anything I say once you're outside and in your own time. I don't want to hear it though." It's so incredibly intellectually weak. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? The mentality that everyone that doesn't get along with you or agree with you is toxic. People are starting to expect being around nobody but people who agree with them, like a constant feedback bubble on social media, but in real life. Back when I was still on Facebook, I used to see the same people, with clockwork regularity, doing the whole, "Well, time to cut the toxic people out of my life." And I'd always think, didn't you just do that a month or so ago? And a few months before that, too? Has it never dawned on you the fact that there always seem to be an inordinate amount of toxic people around you? Have you tried some inward reflection, maybe? The view that you're good enough the way you are. I know that might sound strange, but nobody's perfect and we can all change ourselves in a positive way. This mindset does have its correct uses, such as when you're coming out of a relationship with someone who really bullied you, but more and more I'm seeing it just used to justify staying a worse person than who you could be. Whenever someone decides that if someone has a particular belief, they must hold the most extreme possible version of that belief, or hyperbolic fallacies in general, diversity is good. Yes, everything must be diverse, nothing similar, everything different or it's bad. Equality is good. Yes, everything absolutely unquestionably equal everywhere or it's bad. We should be kind. Yes, never be mean, never be angry, never be harsh or firm or anything but the kindest of kind. Tolerate the worst people all the time, even when you see them doing awful things to people you love. I can fix this person who's hurt me many times. Yeah, you can try as much as you want to, but if those people themselves don't want to change, then there isn't much you can do. If you think it's fine to be absolute jerks to others just because you have money or social media followers. If you can't handle me at my worst, then you don't deserve me at my best. Sometimes someone's worst is an absolute deal breaker, and needing to cut ties and move on doesn't mean that that person doesn't deserve the good things that come from a better relationship. The idea that showing emotion makes you weak, especially men. But just because someone is trying to help, it doesn't mean you can't tell them to stop. You could even argue that it's your responsibility to tell them to stop. Someone misinformed but well-meaning isn't going to realize they're not helping if you don't tell them. They'll be likely to repeat the same mistake in the future. If I never admit that I'm wrong or that I messed up, then I'm never wrong and I've never messed up. Admitting that you're wrong isn't a weakness or a character flaw. Being wrong is something everyone does quite regularly. Except for me, of course. The idea that a life without children is empty and worthless. I'm confident that I'd be a terrible parent, and no, it won't change, and no, my life won't suffer because of it. It's better to have that insight and avoid parenthood than have kids you resent, mistreat, or are unprepared for. Something I notice in the gym is that the no pain, no gain mentality is rampant. It's good to feel soreness and tightness after and during your workout, but working yourself to pain hinders your progress immensely. CrossFit takes this to the extreme, encouraging people to work out until total failure, which can result in severe injury. Working out shouldn't be painful. One wrong tear and you're toast. That if you're a salaried employee and don't finish your work on time, you have to work unpaid overtime until it's complete. But if, at another time, you complete all your work early and there's literally nothing left to be done, you're not allowed to leave, and instead you have to sit at your desk doing nothing until you get in your 40 hours for the week. Employees should either be paid to have their butt in seat for 40 hours, no more no less, or be paid to complete a certain set of work regardless of whether it takes 30 hours or 50 hours. This is a BS double standard when it's kind of implied that you're paid to complete a task, not the certain number of hours in your contract, when there's extra work. When the reality is that you have every right to walk out the door as soon as your number of hours ends. You don't have to stick around till this task is complete if you have a 40-hour contract. Task-based work style is the way. I had a production-based white-collar job that greatly benefited my lifestyle. I went to a ton of hockey games and traveled a lot, as in I'd go to 100 to 120 games per year around the US. I had to complete 40 to 45 audits per month and had the benefit of being able to work from home on 75% of them. My typical week, I'd visit clients Monday through Wednesday to gather documents. I'd just write up a dozen reports on one night and just time it out to submit 2 or 3 at certain times where it made it look like I was working business hours. I'd even stockpile reports that weren't due for another month so that I could take vacations without using up vacation days. Many a time I'd have my work laptop on with me on the other side of the country while visiting a family to keep this up. Whoa! Oh boy, that was a sweet deal for you. Yeah, I've got to say that despite all the uncertainty of freelancing sometimes, the work-life balance from this task-based lifestyle where I have a few good clients has proven to me that you can make a good living without burning yourself out if you put in the right amount of work at the proper times. But yes, I too still have to bring all of my recording equipment on holidays for when these opportunities do come up. Similar but different to your situation, I think. The idea that resting is lazy. Self-care is somewhat of a new concept to most people, and humans suck at it. We focus on things that aren't biologically sound, like dieting, exercising to failure, or working 80 hours a week, and totally ignore what actually makes sense in regards to being healthier and more fulfilled. The idea that we always need to be positive. I've known some people that seemed almost afraid of negativity. There are days where it can't be helped. There's people where it's always present. It's healthy to be somewhat pessimistic or cynical in some matters. Not everything can be spun in a positive way, and showering it with positive thinking feels disingenuous. Saying no offense before saying something offensive won't automatically make your comment less offensive. Life is not often zero-sum. Winning doesn't have to come at the expense of someone else losing. I think people need to start recognizing when win-win situations are available and pursue them more vigorously. Defining people by their jobs, the 40-hour work week, using automation to hurt instead of help, bootlicking to bosses who do not and will not care about you, the productivity-centric social expectations. The idea that the complainer is always wrong. I'll admit they're annoying sometimes, but they're often making good points. If you aren't a criminal, you don't need to worry about the cops. And the related, you don't need privacy if you've got nothing to hide. A mistake means I'm a bad person. How can you learn from mistakes if you can't recognize when you make them? Nobody's interested in having a relationship with me, and that definitely means there's a problem with the entire gender I'm interested in as a whole. Or, I haven't found a good relationship yet, and that means I'll never find one. A bad fan base doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad show. Zack Snyder does make some good movies, and Rick and Morty is real good. Avoid using the word black to describe the color of a black person's skin when in non-volatile context. Customers complaining to me, yeah, that one guy made my food wrong. Who? The darker one? Because I messed up in life, it's easier to drown in the guilt than let it change me and learn to swim. When I was a kid, we didn't have all of this. Car seats and allergy awareness, flu vaccines, social media workers, inclusion-based education, therapy, anti-bullying effort, and so on. We were just fine. 10 years working in mental health tells me people like you are not in fact fine. Using a small percentage of one group's behavior and extrapolating that out to represent everyone. For example, 35 people out of 13,000 on welfare cheated the system. Therefore, it's a scam and we need to get rid of it. Another example, 3 babies had to be flown across the country for medical treatment. Every crying baby on an airplane is a life or death situation and you can't judge the parents. Just because a few people did something negative, it doesn't mean every single person is going to do the same thing. That men can't be the victims of the unspeakable act. I have no idea why this is an argument still. The R word is still the R word. The second someone says no or resists, continuing is wrong. Much like how people try to say marital unspeakable act doesn't exist because pleasing your spouse is a duty. Nobody owes their body to another person. Men are allowed to not want to do the deed, and for someone to push it is just as wrong as doing it to a woman. It should be punished just as severely, and people who disregard or make fun of male victims are sick frickin' pigs. People saying, I'm sorry for something they did to you, when they're obviously not, and expecting us to give an F. If I tailgate the person in front of me, they'll go faster. What a great mentality to have if you want to rear-end someone. Anything weird or different is automatically bad. The teenagers need to act like adults when they're treated like children. The idea that anything slightly feminine a guy does is gay. The customer is always right, and that's infuriating for those in retail and food service. That when a family member is crappy to you or toxic, you're just supposed to put up with it because they're family. Well, you only have one mom. What would happen if she died in a car accident tomorrow? Then how would you feel? That logic is bullcrap. Men are all about reason and women are all about emotion. If we don't agree politically, then you're the enemy and you need to be destroyed. What's worse is that if you belong to a certain party, you're obligated to agree with every single belief and proposition they throw out. Otherwise, you're not considered a true member of that political party. And when said people are brainwashed to believe everything their political party suggests is the only correct way to do things. Musicians, actors, and athletes are so good because they're so talented, instead of acknowledging the hard work they have to put into it every day. Cook. My boyfriend's dad seems to believe this, so it's sort of resulted in nobody in the house cooking because mum's refusing to, since dad won't and boyfriend does a lot of double shifts at work, so he can't, and when he's not at work, there's no groceries in the house to cook with because nobody else cooks. What baller move can an educator make to command instant respect? I went to a small charter school for middle school. Our English teacher was brand new to teaching. If I remember correctly, she was only 22, which seemed ancient at the time. She always did her best to be so cheerful and make learning fun. But the thing that truly solidified her spot as my favorite teacher was that for every student's birthday, she'd give you a personalized mini notebook. It was just a simple small composition notebook that she had filled the first couple of pages with, telling you how much she loved having you as a student, how far she knew I'd go, and other affirmations. It seemed small, but as a 13-year-old who had a crappy home life, it made all the difference in how I acted the rest of the year. When I was in the first grade, my mother gave me one of many really awful haircuts. The first day back at school afterwards, the kids picked on me horribly, so much so that I ran out and hid. The principal found me and we went back to the classroom and he asked me to wait outside for a minute while he talked to the class. Then he walked me to his office and bought me a Coke. The next day, first thing in the morning, we had an assembly with the entire school and he walked up on stage with his head shaved and completely bald and talked about bullying and the like. Some 20 years down the road, he had retired and I ran into him at college. Shook his hand and said, "You probably don't remember me, but..." "Yes, I do," he interrupted and said my name and the event. The man was and is a hero in my eyes. I had a teacher in elementary school who was prone to outbursts. He had a short fuse, at least compared to every other adult I knew at the time. For instance, when several of us in class weren't listening, he'd throw a piece of chalk against the wall to get our attention. Honestly, we just thought he was crazy. A year or maybe 2 years later, the school had a talent show. Like a big one, in the gym in front of everyone. One of my classmates was really into music and wanted to play a drum solo. Our teacher had mentioned offhand that he used to be in a band and played drums, so my classmate asked him, or sort of dared him, like kids often do with adults, to play a solo in front of the school. And he did. He frickin' rocked it. But that's not what made me respect him. Turns out the band he had played for was very successful and at the time quite a popular rock band. He left just before they hit it big because he wanted to be a teacher. He chose teaching kids over the chance at fame and fortune and didn't regret it. Decided to look him up and he's still a teacher and doing very well. Made me smile. I guess even though he was a good guy who found personal success, at the worst moments of teaching, you might be prone to outbursts when you thought about how you could be rocking out in a band instead. Hopefully he found the wider experience of teaching more fulfilling outside of those frustrating moments. I had a physical education teacher who organized basketball, volleyball, handball, and football tournaments, organized Olympic games for the local kids, and taught us dancing on weekends. On his own, just for us kids, because we lived in a remote place without many activities or things going on. He was more than a simple teacher. I feel like this is the main reason that a lot of teachers in rural areas don't get credit for the amount of work they do outside of the classroom. Up here in Montana, many teachers have been known to actively go out of their way to help the kids, for the kids' benefit, whether it be coaching, tutoring, or helping out in general. I know many teachers everywhere do this, but after moving up here, living up here 10 plus years and seeing how much a rural community comes together to showcase the teachers, it's made me gain a better appreciation overall. I sincerely wish teachers got more credit because there are some out there that just make that impact on someone, and I enjoy reading about it. It makes me appreciate several of my past teachers from high school and college immensely more than I once did. I want to shout out this one teacher of mine. She was our AP English language teacher for our senior year of high school. On one of the first days in her class, she explained how she went from being a kindergarten teacher to a high school senior teacher. She always saw off her cute and happy kindergarten kids, but as they grew up and they came back to visit her, a lot of them came back to her troubled and dissatisfied with their lives. It made her really emotional to see how people treated these kids that she loved so much, and how she couldn't afford to see kids so disconnected with life, and how she didn't want them to suffer as they headed out towards college and their adult lives. So she changed curriculums and started teaching seniors. If I remember right, it always came down to sending her kids off with a smile and prepping them for the real world. I respect the heck out of her, and she'll always be one of my favorites. Truly like a mother to all of her students. When I was a kid, we had to purchase these red punch cards to get lunch after school. Unfortunately, we didn't have that much money, so there were times where my punch card would run out and I wasn't able to eat for a while until we got enough money to repurchase another one. Why nobody in my family applied for assistance was beyond me. I had one teacher who noticed I wasn't eating every day, and she would bring an extra sandwich and offer it to me whenever she saw that. I really didn't understand how kind that was when I was a kid, but obviously as an adult, that was such an amazing gesture of kindness. In middle school, I went through something similar. I'd just go to my social studies class instead of the cafeteria for lunch because I'd never had food. Teachers started leaving a few dollars on my desk and would let me get lunch and eat with her. I ate with her for most of my 8th grade year, and I'd always bring her money that I got, like for birthdays or holidays, to try to pay her back. She'd just put it in her drawer and give it back to me later. I remember that to this day, and I try to make sure I have change and ones on me at all times for any of my students who need it, as well as keeping my bottom drawer stocked with snacks. My students always know they can count on me for food if they're hungry. The one who didn't take crap from me. I was a pretty decent writer in school, able to pop stuff out quickly that was superficial but sounded good. The first time I had a teacher hand my work back pointing out that I managed to completely fail to say anything was sort of a slap in the face that I didn't realize I needed. I'd been able to bullcrap my way through most English classes, but I'll never forget the professor telling me that she knew I could do better and to give more than I was. I had a professor once state that she doesn't believe in trick questions. Students trip themselves up enough without the professor helping that along. She never did put any trick questions. My professor said she wasn't going to have a textbook for the class. Basically, she didn't respect the textbook representatives trying to take the farmer approach to force kids to buy a $170 access code. Instant respect. You just had to show up at the lectures and she'd teach you what you needed to know. I remember my 5th grade teacher had every student circle one book from the Scholastic Book Fair flyer. When the day came for the fair, if you didn't go to the library or purchase that book for yourself, she'd buy it with her own money to make sure every student got to take a book home. I wouldn't have had any books of my own if it weren't for her. Junior year of high school, English class. We were discussing a story we'd read. One student, let's call him Carl, made a point. The teacher was dismissive and basically said Carl was wrong. The next day, after we took our seats, the teacher said, "Before we begin, I was thinking about what Carl said yesterday. I was wrong to dismiss it so quickly, so let's take a look at that again," and then went on to repeat Carl's point and initiate a conversation with the entire class. After the conversation, it became apparent Carl's point was indeed off base, but I was impressed the teacher publicly owned his mistake and went down the path he should have. Told us a joke about his name before we could and allowed us to eat during his class. Because kids your age can't help being hungry all the time. He was alright with it as long as we did it quietly. Great guy. His whole attitude made all of us actually pay attention and do our best. The bad grades. If you work hard, I'll work harder to make you pass. He worked hard for me, and I passed. Treated kids with autism or Asperger's like actual human beings. In my school, I was in a special needs unit for kids with Asperger's and autism called the CDU, the Communication Disorder Unit. The kids in there ranged from having mild Asperger's to full-on severe autism, and as such, most teachers treated everyone from there like they had severe mental health problems, just because they were labeled as having autism or Asperger's, even if it was very mild. But there was one support teacher in the CDU who was genuinely just a nice guy. Whether he was talking to kids who had severe autism or just some mild social anxiety, he wouldn't talk extra slowly or call you bud or pal at the end of the sentence. He'd talk to everyone like they were real human beings. It might seem like a small thing, but when that's pretty much how all teachers talk to you and treat you in every class, it's very refreshing to talk to someone who would talk to you based on who you were as a person, rather than treating someone differently for being labeled as autistic. English teacher in high school asked where my homework was. I responded, "I forgot to do it," and he said to the rest of the class, "Why can't you guys just be like Eddie? He doesn't come up with some excuse, he just tells me he didn't do it." While that's funny, and I appreciate that the teacher valued honesty above time-wasting excuses, I do hope that he took measures to help you learn the material at hand while he was cutting through the bullcrap. I had a sociology professor who gave us a do not fail checklist. Complete it and you were guaranteed to pass. I also had a high school chem teacher who bet us all $100 that if we passed class, we'd pass our first college chem class. He was just really awesome all around. He told stories about traveling the world over breaks, got absurdly off topic to teach us random stuff, had a physics lab where we got to throw eggs at him, and occasionally we had a class where absolutely nothing got done because we were having a discussion. He used to give out quarters for correcting him or for anything done really well. He put up posters about his trips and gave us extra credit quizzes about them because he said being observant was really important in chemistry. Actually, there were a few really weird activities in that class. I'll never forget the time he ate chalk to prove to us that it was the same stuff as in milk. He was brilliant, hilarious, and just a really incredible human being. I'm epileptic and had a large set of seizures not long before finals in high school chemistry. My seizures tend to mess with my memory, and those multiple seizures had devastated my memory of everything I'd learned in class that semester. I was doing reasonably well in the class, but then absolutely bombed the test. After the failed test, I ended up just shy of passing the class, and he decided to give me a bonus question that passed me. I didn't expect that, but the empathy was nice to see from a teacher. Even so, the whole situation sucked. My math teacher told me that I should have studied better. He then offered for me to retake the test, which seems reasonable enough, but there was no point as all the info was just gone. I've only had one seizure of the same sort that was worse than that, but fortunately I've got a very understanding employer. It doesn't hurt that I've got a union rep as well. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? I had a business studies teacher who used to be a mental health professional. She knew the signs when my depression was particularly bad, for example submitting work at 3 a.m., and would always make sure I'd eaten and offered me coffee and generally made her classroom a safe space for anyone. Sestine, if you're reading this, you're amazing. It was small, but he told us he was going to be in a bad mood that day because somebody stole his bike. Just treating us like people was something that was rare in that school. Instead of shouting at my loud class for not shutting up before the lesson began, my history teacher decided to quietly tell the story of a pink elephant that wanted to be an astronaut. After a few seconds, people started to shut up and listen to the pink elephant story. When everyone was quiet and listening, he stopped mid-story. As much as it made me respect him, "Why didn't you finish the story, for frick's sake? That cliffhanger, man!" I moved out of home during high school. It was stressful, to say the least. I started to fall behind in assignments, I'd be absent for days at a time, and I missed tests and stuff. I ended up explaining the bare minimum of my situation to my English teacher, and their response always stuck with me. Just do what you can. It may not seem like much, but right then and there, for a 16-year-old kid who felt like simply living was a burden, it was everything. In my first year of high school, my class decided to play a simple prank on our English and SOSE teacher, by all laughing when he faced the board and then stopping every time he turned around to face us. After a few minutes of this, he just left the classroom without a word. We all sat there, confused, until a few minutes later, the assistant principal comes in and explains that we've really upset our teacher. He made us believe we'd seriously effed up. And then our teacher walked in and pretty much went, "Gotcha!" That son of a witch had our respect from then on in. My high school science teacher paused class to rip a student apart for bullying another student, called it out as it happened in front of everyone, and that bully never went near that other kid again. I'll always remember that. One of my history teachers in high school did the same thing. We were doing out loud reading, and one of the guys in our class wasn't a native speaker and was struggling with some of the more complex words. One or two people started to laugh at him, which is when the teacher stopped the class and openly tore them a new one. She never once raised her voice in doing so, but I've never seen such a thorough shredding before or since. Mad respect to her for standing up for the kid who was trying his hardest, because that's just not seen enough these days. We had a pretty cool teacher in the 5th grade. He was down with all the stuff we talked about, made jokes, made lessons fun, but at the same time did not take crap from anyone. We had these really naughty boys in our class, like they pulled pranks, skipped, bullied other kids and never turned in assignments or projects, and one day they did something really bad. I don't really remember what it was specifically, and it made our teacher furious. I was like, this is it, we're all about to be a bunch of witnesses. I thought he was about to put hands on these guys. He was livid. He called the main instigator to the front of the class and just stared at him for what seemed like forever. And this kid was just like not bothered and had an attitude. The teacher then starts talking, cool and calm, lecturing the kid about all the bad choices he was making, about how he needs to think about if these choices are going to get him anywhere in life, stuff like that. He brought that kid to tears. This kid who thought he was the man, oh so cool and untouchable, and would never have to face the music kind of kid. He stood there in tears. The teacher wasn't rude or disrespectful, didn't hit the kid or scream or shout at him, simply spoke to him about making better choices. Teacher said the lecture was a lesson to all of us. I just think it was so cool the way he handled it. Spoke to that kid, and all of us, in a way that made us think about our future for the first time. Make good choices, guys. I had a principal in a new school that I hadn't met yet because the first day of school at my new school was my dad's funeral. He had no idea what I looked like, but he sought me out in the really crowded hallways and gave me a hug and his condolences. Never felt creepy, by the way. He only cared about me. He went on to local politics and became our mayor. Only time I've ever truly voted for the best person for the job, and not the least objectionable. Mr. Peary, if you see this, you earned my instant respect and kept it with your future actions. We need more like you. I told my English teacher about my unfortunate experience at my last school. It was just stupid people treating me like crap, and he approached me after class and said, "Hey, I'm sorry that happened to you. You know, there's a phrase in the English language that I think you ought to know. F them." Yes, the narrator is aware of the irony of how groundbreaking it must have been to be affirmed by a swearing teacher, and yet for me to be unable to actually vocalize what he really said for fear of demonetization. Still, great story. Hopefully the impact wasn't removed too far by the prudish nature of this platform. A supply teacher spent the day recovering my lost sticker collection. I'm sure it's done in other countries, but in UK primary and junior schools, playtime becomes a trading hub on the playground for stickers. Anyway, one particular day I made a massive haul, which I misplaced for a split second, and then it was gone. I was devastated, and my teacher saw me in distress when I got back to my class. She promised me she'd get them all back for me. True to her word, she did. In fact, it turned out several people had made off with my stash of stickers, and she spent her lunchtime tracking down every one of the children who had them, claimed them back, and then grilled the kids about who else had my cards and getting them to see her. By the end of lunch, she returned to me all accounted for. For a supply teacher to do this, it was a seriously kind gesture, as most teachers would have shrugged their shoulders and carried on as if nothing had happened. A lot of people are asking me what a supply teacher is. It's just another way to call a temp replacement teacher when the normal teacher is ill or can't teach on that day. This one was an absolute legend. We had her for a few weeks and she made learning actually fun. First, she came up with a picture of Robin Hood, and each limb or part of the body had a reward on it. Small rewards, like 10 minutes of playtime, for example. Bigger parts meant bigger rewards. As the students did well, like good marks or good behavior, They got stickers and you stuck it on the picture. It was a class effort as you all worked towards the prizes, and for our young minds, this was amazing as we'd never had that kind of incentive. Second, there was Student of the Day, the MVP of the class, and she'd announce it at the end of the day in front of the class so that you knew you were the MVP and everyone else knew it and how you earned it. She even had a dedicated corner of the chalkboard for your name. Again, as a kid, it just blew your mind and you got perks like getting to sit on the chairs instead of the floor, and of course, more stickers. Yeah, I did cry when I saw her go. When she got those stickers back, I was absolutely compelled that night to write her a thank you message and got my parents to sign it. I had a professor that made it crystal clear that if we ever made an appointment and didn't show up, he'd take 5 points off our final grade. I tried to find him during office hours and he wasn't available. I told him that I deserved an extra 5 points because he wasn't available when he said he'd be, and he gave it to me in the interest of fairness. I remember my first math class in college. I didn't take any math my senior year of high school because I finished my math requirement my junior year. Anyway, the first math test hit me like a truck after never having to try in high school, and I scored in the low 60s. The next 3 tests I learned to study and got 3 98s in a row. The last week of class, the professor, who was hardline by the way and would kick you out for having your phone out, called me up to her desk after class and said, "Clearly, you were having a bad day that first exam, so don't worry about that grade because I won't count it." It really changed my view of that professor. My 4th grade teacher would have a classroom yard sale every year after she did her annual spring cleaning. Her daughter was about 13, so the things she'd recently outgrown would be age-appropriate for us. I'm aware this wouldn't work out every year, and I'm not sure how long she taught at our school, but she told us it was a regular thing. We didn't have to pay for them. If we needed or wanted something, we could just have it. There was some sort of lesson incorporated into the yard sale, how to trade or value money or something like that, so that we didn't feel embarrassed if we needed a few more things than the other kids did. I wish I could remember exactly how it worked, but this happened in 1994. She was an all-around great teacher. Thanks, Miss Farrell, whose name I've probably misspelled. Your class was fun. I had a professor in college who was 5 minutes late to the start of an 8 a.m. lecture and clearly distraught. She started apologizing for the delay and explaining that she just got off the phone with her sister, telling her that her mother had just died of cancer. The remainder of her lectures for the day were cancelled, but she was going to try to keep it together long enough to do ours, since we were already there so early in the morning. I respected that she decided to give us the lecture we had come for despite being in the immediate shock of mourning a loved one and being vulnerable enough to tell us. My band director, he laughed with us. He talked to us like people instead of lowly teenage students. And he read to us The Power of Positive Thinking. He saw a need for it. Some of the kids were bored out of their skulls and thought it was stupid, but some of us did listen. Personally, I love that he recognized a problem and took action. I've been out of high school for, 30 years now. I'm still in touch with him. He's the most influential person in my life that isn't related to me, and it's because he chose to invest and do more than the bare minimum as a teacher. Europeans expose the wildest myths about America. Are they actually true? The yellow school buses seem mythical to me. I couldn't actually believe they were a thing when I first went to the US. My Italian exchange student had me cracking up yesterday, saying how amazing the school buses are. She was like, "They are yellow and all lined up like 20 of them. Then they all leave at the same time. I must take pictures to show my friends." Can you really right turn at a crossroads even if the traffic light is red? It depends on the state, but most of the time, yeah. They'll put up a no turn on red sign if they don't want you to. It looks as though in all the American TV and movies I've seen that all Americans have to file their own taxes. Is this true? Across the pond, this is all done automatically by your own employer. Okay, so people are writing into me and it seems like it is true. Looks as though this system can work to your advantage with tax breaks for continuing education or marital status and stuff. Although I'm awful at paperwork and I'm pretty sure the IRS would be after me as soon as I filed my first return. Thanks for the replies. Okay, a price is in stores marked tax-free and they tell you the full price at the checkout. Yes. There are state and country taxes, but there are nationwide ad campaigns for things. So the base price for an item might be $100 everywhere, but the tax could be $5 in one state or $8 in another. I might be in one city and pay $6 in taxes and drive 10 minutes to the next city and pay $7 in taxes. It's just something you get used to. You add on whatever a local tax is to your items and you pay that final price. Are house parties common and are they like in the movies, with like 30+ drunk people and people doing the deed everywhere? I've never been to a house party where people were just doing the deed everywhere, but yeah, 30 or 40 or more drunk people with a few rooms where people kind of disappear to and come out awkwardly. I didn't believe it until this afternoon. It's the firearm shops. My friend is in Vegas at the moment, and he just posted a picture of him in a shop that looks almost identical to the ones in GTA. I'd just assumed that GTA was exaggerating. GTA 5 is almost exactly like driving around Southern California. My friends and I marveled at how close it looks to the real streets here. I have to assume that its identicalness applies all the way to the idiots like me driving against traffic and suddenly throwing satchel charges into clusters of cars just for funsies as well. Can you really end up at an elite university where you're dumb as a brick but good at sports? Yes, is the short answer. But does this mean they all finish university and get a degree, or are they just doing sports and just allowed to get awful grades the whole time? Generally speaking, they all finish and get a degree, though the ultimate goal is for them to go into professional sports. Not all of them are dumb as a brick, but at least in my school, the guys who played sports got a lot more slack when it came to academics because they were so good at sports. Is New York City really as busy as it looks in the movies? On TV, it looks like there's a billion people jammed in there, with everyone moving shoulder to shoulder in one huge angry mess, and you could lose a child if you blink. Is that just put on for the cameras to look busy? None of the cities here are anything like that. Yes and no. Usually in my experience, that's only around Manhattan, and although not as extreme as a lot of movies show it, there's a lot of focused people walking around. Generally, the only time I see that many people huddled around is near a large subway station. I had a couple from Seattle stay at my flat for a couple of days as couch surfers, and I was quite surprised to hear them call each other honey or hun, just like in the movies. Is it that easy to get a weapon? I read that Walmart sells weapons, so how is the process to get one? In Texas, buying a firearm is pretty easy. You go and whoever's selling it will do a quick background check, but if you're clean, you can walk out with a piece in under 30 minutes. Is it really that risky to walk into a ghetto neighborhood in a big city, or is it more something people just say? Always wondering, as we have bad neighborhoods in my country as well, but if you walk through them at night, you're not really that much more unsafe than in other parts of cities. In short, are there really no-go areas in the States? Crap, I don't even live near the city and there's areas I don't even like going to in the daytime. Jaywalking. How likely are you to get in trouble for it, and what are the punishments like? I'm British, and as a kid I had no idea what jaywalking was. It was mentioned in American TV, but never explained, so I assumed it was some sort of overly flamboyant walking. There was an American guy walking with a British friend of mine in the UK. My friend casually walked across the road right in front of a police car, but the American, clearly unaware of the law, did not cross. They just stared at each other from each side of the road, not understanding what the other had done. Do people really have air conditioners just hanging out the windows, only held in place by the window itself? It seems crazy unsafe. These aircons are usually balanced such that most of the weight rests on the windowsill. The outside portion is just a hair heavier than the inside, so that the lip of the top of the machine rests against the bottom of the window frame, which is in a raised position, of course. You're supposed to drive 1 to 4 screws, depending on the design, into the window frame to keep everything from moving. The machines look precarious because they do tilt downwards on the outside, but they're supposed to do this so that the condensate drips away to the outside rather than the inside. Finally, many of them have 120-volt motors in them so that they can be plugged into any available outlet, although larger ones might want 208 to 240 volts. Is there really such a strict attitude towards teenagers drinking alcohol? In the UK, 0 Fs are given. Legal drinking age is 21 nationwide, and if a teen gets caught by the cops, they can get in some pretty good trouble. In Australia, if you're drunk underage, the police can't do anything. They'll either call your parents or pick you up from the police station to take you home. Do you guys seriously use those red cups at parties? Why not just drink straight out of the bottle or can? Oh, we do. They're cheaper to use than real cups, and usually kegs are present, which aren't really easy to pass around. Kegs aren't really a part of UK drinking culture. Do you just go to a store and buy a keg? Here we have aisles of booze, but it's all bottles and cans. Are the portions of food really as big as everyone makes out? I've had a lot of people come back from the States and tell me that the amount of food you get on a plate is insane. I'm not talking about fine dining here, by the way. I'm flying over in a little over a week, and I need to know if I should prepare myself. I should say I'm from Scotland, and we have a lot of what you have, only in smaller, from what I've been reading, portions. A couple of you seem to think that I'm from a third world nation. Sorry for the confusion. Yes, the food is actually a relatively small part of the cost in a US restaurant. You can increase profit by selling more units to more people or by selling more per person. Since food is only a small factor, you can offer people twice as much for less than twice the cost, and it seems like a bargain. It's very common to see fast food restaurants sell something like a 16-ounce soda for 89 cents and a 24-ounce one for $1.09. The second is 50% more but less than 25% higher cost. Per ounce, it's much cheaper. The actual cost of soda is basically nothing compared to paying the cashier to take the order. It's the same thing with the entree too. They could sell you a reasonable meal with 600 calories for $5, but it's much better for them if they sell you a huge meal with 1,200 calories for $7. They get $2 more per person with only a slight increase in cost to them. If you fly over here, be prepared to see portions which are 50% or double the size of many places you might be used to. The narrator fondly remembers going to diners where, even though the food wasn't exactly healthy, you'd get a towering stack of deep-fried, soul-soothing, artery-clogging goodness and endless coffee for barely any money at all. Looking forward to going back soon. Is it really flat, dry, and arid in some places? I've seen pictures or shows of colleges and towns that look like they're in the middle of nowhere and there are no hills or mountains for miles. Also, what's a Klondike bar? America is incredibly diverse. You name a climate and it's here somewhere. I can go from cold snow in the Rocky Mountains to the hot, dry desert of Phoenix. Yes, the desert looks just like the cartoons. Klondike bar is a hunk of ice cream covered in chocolate. This is a common novelty and it comes in many forms. I haven't had one in years, but now I think I need one. Do you really tip everyone for everything, even if the service was terrible? Well, not everyone. Easy rule of thumb, if they bring you stuff, tip them. If you get the stuff yourself, don't tip. So if a waiter or a waitress brings you food, tip them. If a valet brings you your car, tip them. If your room service brings food to your hotel room, tip them. If you ordered fast food from a fast food joint and bring it to your own table, don't tip. If you bought a computer from an electronics store, don't tip. If someone checks you into the hotel, don't tip. If the service was bad, give a bad tip of like 10%. If service was absolutely horrible, then you don't tip at all. Also, the rule of thumb doesn't always work. For example, I'm not sure why we tip bartenders when all they do is pour you a drink. More like someone at a fast food joint than a waiter at a restaurant. My son ran outside to stop the ice cream truck yesterday. My Italian exchange student stuck her head out the bedroom window and yelled, "Oh, they do exist, just like the movies." I've always wanted to know just how popular is this spray cheese in a can stuff over there in the US. I think it's called Cheese Whiz. Do many people actually eat that, or is it a sometimes food? The USA is the only place I've heard of that has this product. Asking the important questions today. Cheese Whiz doesn't come in a spray can. That's easy cheese. Cheese Whiz typically comes in a jar and is more of a cheese sauce. There are actually two different types of Cheese Whiz, the kind sold in retail locations in jars, and a separate formula that gets sold to restaurants, about 90% of which are in the Philadelphia area to go on cheesesteak sandwiches. Neither retail product is highly thought of or widely used by anyone I know, but I love me some whiz on my cheesesteak. Are weeks of paid vacation really that uncommon? Yep, the average corporation starts at 5 paid days off per year. As you get promoted, you graduate to 10 days, then 15, but Americans don't take as many days off as Europeans do. This is mind-boggling. I don't understand why American companies can't understand the benefits of well-rested employees. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? Do you guys really pay for everything when you're having dinner with a girl? That is pretty typical when you first start dating, since you're trying to woo the girl. Once you're in a relationship, things tend to get split a little more. If my girl and I do dinner and drinks, I'll typically pay for dinner and then we'll go someplace else for drinks and she'll pay. Why does everyone live in dormitories or campus at university? In Australia, that's pretty much completely unheard of. You either stay living at home or you share a house off campus. Mostly freshmen and sophomore, those first 2 years of school, they'll live in dorms. The older students move to outside housing like you describe. Also, many students go to school far from home, so living at their house isn't possible. Some students will stay in dorms for 4 years as their scholarship would pay their tuition and dorm. Is there really that many obese people? Kinda. I just spent a week in Italy and the people there were on average far heavier than what you see in my city. But I live in a pretty fit city. If you go to Houston, Texas, then yes, there are a lot of really obese people. Lots of regional differences here. Do you guys really like our accents that badly? Yes. Yes, yes, yes. I was always wondering if people really work so many hours, like far over 50 or 60 hours per week, up to 80 and more. Like bankers, lawyers, cops, and especially doctors, those working at hospitals, seem to have no life, and they'll be working night and day and always. I'm interested in any occupation, by the way. I've only named those which I've come across most on TV. We're talking shows like Suits, Grey's Anatomy, and any crime show. In Europe, most of these jobs wouldn't even be allowed by law to work more than 38 or 40 hours per week, and we have so many bank holidays where everything apart from bars and restaurants is closed. So as well as our 5-week holidays, we get many bank holidays in addition. Wait, you guys think 50 hours is a lot? I work about 55 hours a week. The first 40 are regular time, and the next 15 are overtime. The overtime hours are paid at time and a half. Let's say I make $50 an hour. The first 40 hours will net me $2,000, and the next 15 will net me $1,125. So the 2 hours of overtime would make me as much as working one regular week. It's profitable. Is there really a social stigma against being an atheist? It depends on what area of the US you're in. In the Bible Belt, people care, but here in SoCal, no one would give a crap. I live in a conservative small town of Texas, and I'm an atheist. I just generally don't tell people. Friends will still be friends, but they will be gently trying to push God on you on the regular. Does everyone really identify themselves as Irish American or Italian American or German American or whatever, as opposed to just plain old American? The thing with America is that most people can trace their heritage back several generations. Since we can, it's not uncommon to have grandparents or great-grandparents that are immigrants. While many Americans have never been to their homeland, we know where it is. Plus, when you have a Nagoyan, Hernandez, and O'Doyle as good friends, it's easy to guess where everyone's from. I consider myself American when I go to other countries, because let's be honest, that's what people see anyway. I think the aspect of seeing yourself as being from a certain culture different from simply America really stems back from those old colonial times where those nationalities really did band together and kind of keep close ties compared to how they reacted to other cultural groups there. The melting pot thing did eventually work, but it took a while. And I think that's where people's attachment to their sub-identities as Americans stem from. Do all of your high schools have that corridor of lockers? I've never seen that in any schools around here, but in American movies, they're everywhere. Every school I went to growing up did. Every hallway was lined with lockers on either side. Each student was assigned a locker at the beginning of the year and was allowed to visit it between each class to get their books and supplies for the next class. Unlike in Europe, where the teachers move from one room to the next between classes, students move between the classes. So during every class change, the hallways would be filled with students moving from one room to the next. This is one of the main reasons we have lockers, so that you don't have to carry all of your stuff around all day. If you sat in the same room all day, it would be easier to keep everything with you. I always felt bad for the custodians who'd set all of the combinations on the lockers each year. It must take them days to do them all. I've got a question related to the other one about university dorms. Are fraternities such a big deal? It's totally alien to me in Scotland. They can be a big deal, but they don't have to be. Some people join fraternities, most people don't. I'd like to ask if high school really has the tendency to have some main groups who mainly hang out and sit together in the cafeteria, like there are the cheerleaders, the footballers, the nerds, the punks, and the skater boys, for example. And I'd like to know if girls are really so mean at high school. Like if one girl or group of girls are really popular, do they really behave so cattily and treat other girls, maybe the less pretty or nerdy ones, that badly? Like, you know, those Carrie levels of cruelty. Since I take more interest in culture and society, I really do wonder if white Americans and African Americans really aren't hanging out a lot together. Like, you have so many shows where all the main characters are white, like Uncle Charlie, Gilmore Girls, New Girl, California, almost any show, which have maybe one token black or Indian or Latino guy, and then you have shows where everyone is African American, Prince of Bel-Air, Bill Cosby Show, Everyone Hates Chris. Yeah. The black and white stuff is weird, and I think it's a microcosm of the US in general. I went to a high school in St. Louis with one of the relatives of the young guy who was sadly shot by the police in Ferguson. At my high school, the black kids and the white kids were always cool with each other, but always separated by some kind of collective choice. There was a large student lounge. One side of it was the white side, where all the white kids sat, and the other side was the black side, where all the black kids sat. Us white kids might go over to the black side for a bit. There was no hostility, but would always be visitors on their side and vice versa. There were some hot black girls, but if one of my friends dated a black chick, it would have been considered strange, albeit in an unspoken sort of way. Not bad and not wrong, but strange. I don't know why, it just never seemed to happen. At my school there were cliques, but it wasn't defined by football player or cheerleaders or guys who took green herb. It was just whoever you got along with. For the most part, everyone was pretty friendly to each other and we never had a mean girl kind of clique, but there were girls who individually were mean, but they weren't out about it. It was more like they'd gossip all the time and say some pretty catty stuff. Is it true that cops really crash and break up high school parties? Where I am, you just have to be 16 to buy alcohol, and you can drink whenever. Heck, it's even allowed to sell alcohol to kids under 16 if it's a private party or gathering. They won't arrest anybody, but they will hand out citations to the easy targets. Mostly, they just break it up. Do you really live in shared rooms at university? I couldn't imagine sharing a room with a stranger past like 15 years old. What are you doing sharing bedrooms with a stranger before 15? I once asked my American friend if people of Walmart actually exist in America, or is it just an overplayed joke they like showing on television and movies. It's real, and it's amazing. Is everything really bigger in America? Many things are, for sure. Big trucks, big houses, big servings, big people, and big stores. And big states as well. I do government work, so I interact with a lot of international types, and by that I mean contractors from Europe or Japan, mostly, and some diplomat types. You wouldn't believe how many think they can drive from New York or Seattle to LA in an afternoon. In New York, is there really steam constantly coming out of the ground? Also, what the heck is validated parking? Yes, a large utility company generates steam at large plants and pipes it to customers for heating, cooling, power, and cleaning purposes. You've got to pay for parking everywhere, but if you go to a specific place in the area or complex, they'll validate your parking pass, which basically means you get parking for free or a reduced fare. It's because you're using the lot to support a local business. And from what I hear, some people are absolutely ruthless about misusing the system to avoid paying parking fees in some places. I still love the story of the couple who saved hundreds on parking every year by validating their parking at a casino and playing a single-chip game of roulette before work every day. US TV and movies often depict ex-husbands having to pay alimony to their ex-wives, even when there doesn't seem to be any kids to support, unless and until the ex-wife gets remarried. Does that actually happen on a large scale? I do want to point out that even though it's pretty rare over here, sometimes the wife has to pay alimony for their ex-husbands, like Katy Perry and Russell Brand, but he waived his right to it. It's supposed to be whichever spouse, husband or wife, who made most or all of the money in the relationship, has to pay the other one, husband or wife, alimony to maintain standard of living for some sort of period of time. It depends on the state. It's usually husband to wife because men are typically still the breadwinners, but women paying men or no one paying anything because of equal pay is getting more prevalent. Is Mary J. really that popular? If you take a random sample of 100 regular 17-year-olds, how many do you think will have smoked green herb or done it regularly? It depends on what state, as it's legal medically and even recreationally in some places. I live in Southern California, so it's quite popular here. For a random sample of 17-year-olds, I'd guess at least half have tried it, probably higher, at least, and 25% smoke it regularly. As you get older, it gets more common. Mary J. is a very popular lady here, and she's definitely getting more popular. Are many of your high schools really one gigantic building, such as in The Simpsons, with all of the classrooms bar one or two being all in one large, proud building? In my state, the high schools are one giant building because it snows. The placebo lies you've been living, and you had no idea. I worked at a kid's birthday party place for a couple of years in high school. So many kids cry because they've fallen over or bumped their arm and stuff, never anything too serious. If you said something like, "Can you shake your foot around? Does it feel better? How about jumping in a circle? All right, we're going to blow on your hand so it feels better," and then you'd ask if they were ready to play again, it generally worked like a charm. Also, bandages for tiny little boo-boos. They think they're healed and they get right back to being happy little kids. Your perception of bad luck is basically placebo. The human brain is predisposed to remember bad experiences more vividly than the good ones. Thus, for an example, you might say your luck was always awful at tolls, when in reality you only get stuck in traffic 20 to 50% of the time. So I'm sure this has happened to other people, but this question just reminded me of my principal. During meetings and such, he used the school auditorium, and most of the time I, a senior now at school, had to run the sound and lights. He was extremely annoying about it and would always ask for his mic to be turned up when, in reality, he's already extremely loud and it will bust the speakers. I just pretend to turn it up and ask him if it's good, and he speaks and says, "Oh, that's perfect, thank you." I swear he thinks I'm doing an amazing job, and he'd bring me a Coke or something for dealing with the meetings half the day. Greatest placebo to use against others that I've done. When I worked and trained in tech support, our agents would always get pushback from customers when we asked them to power cycle their phone, which still 9 times out of 10 would fix the issue. So I had them tell the customer to read them some numbers off the back of the battery. This was back when batteries were still removable. We absolutely didn't need the number. At the end of them reading it, we'd tell them that we refreshed a few systems and then they put their battery back in, the phone restarted, and hey presto, it was all fixed. Alternatively, when batteries couldn't be removed, we'd tell them that if the phone was powered on while we did the update, it could ruin their SIM card. So they'd make sure to power off their phone. To do nothing, they'd turn it back on and it worked great. We jumped through all of these hoops because if you tell a customer just to turn their phone off and on again, they get real offended and ask if you think they're stupid. I absolutely love this story because it's so true. Just 2 days ago, I told a client to close his web browser and reopen it to fix an issue on our page. He'd complained of it seemingly being slow today, despite videos from several team members demonstrating it wasn't. He closed and reopened, and voila, it was fixed. He'd had the browser open for months, and it was gobbling memory and needed a restart. Haha, well at least when I'm annoying to techies, I've been smart enough to try turning it off and on already. I know that it's basic advice, but you can't be grumpy about it if you haven't actually tried it, Ken. When you give your young sibling an unconnected controller after he or she kept bugging to join in the game. Now we have children of our own, my husband and I call this playing pretendo. I do commissioned creative stuff. If I deliver the same or next day, people don't think I spent enough time on it. If I wait 3 days to deliver, people are happy because they assume I worked on their project non-stop even though I was done a day or two prior. I'm a freelance artist, and once I painted my client's dog portrait with acrylic. I took photos and sent it to her, and she said she wanted to fix some parts of it. Like hair was too dark and mouth was a little too big. A few hours later, I accidentally resent one of the photos I'd sent to her again. She immediately replied, "Yes, this is what I want." I hadn't touched up anything more, but okay. This reminds me of the story about a restaurant manager who received a complaint from a regular customer because the restaurant didn't carry Hunt's ketchup and only Heinz. So one day, the manager just put Heinz ketchup into a Hunt's bottle for her, and she couldn't tell the difference. Loading spinners on web pages. I once had a user complain to me a web app page was too slow, and it was pretty fast. So I tested him by making the animation spinner spin much faster. He went to my boss to praise me about how much faster the web app was. Spin.js is what I was using. Not even a spinner, but we added a message after a loading that said nearly there when it got to the next step, and we got significantly fewer slow loading complaints. I install semi-truck bumpers. 90% of the time, a customer will say it looks off by 1/8 of an inch. I'll make a noise with the impact gun on a bolt and say, "How's that?" "Oh yeah, now it looks great." Nothing moved whatsoever. Some guys are just extremely critical, I guess. My dog's medicine coming out of his treat tin instead of medicine packaging makes a seconds ago disgusting medicine taste mysteriously treat-like. I just tell him to his face that it's a treat when it's clearly a pill covered in peanut butter. Same here, without the peanut butter. I just go, "You want a treat?" like I normally would, and she comes running up and scarfs the pills down. I then of course give her a real treat for being good. I've made my pup's medicine a real high-value treat by making her do tricks before I give it to her. Heh. As a former lifeguard, I can assure you that whatever cleanup you see lifeguards doing after someone chucks up in the pool is almost certainly just for show. There really isn't anything you can do, you just let the filter and chlorine take care of it and pretend to clean to please the suburban mums. The Keep My Data Private button on websites. I sold Christmas trees as a kid in junior and senior high school. I learned a trick for super fussy customers who had me hold up multiple trees to show them. After the 10th or so tree, I'd yell to my coworker, "Hey Mike, if they don't want this one, put it aside for me. Nicest tree I've seen this year." Worked like a charm. When I see salesmen doing this, I always feel like they're taking me for a fool. It seems like the oldest trick in the book. I wonder why people are still falling for it. The original Febreze was unscented, but nobody believed it worked, so they added scent to it. You're telling me Febreze isn't just the smell? I thought the odor trapping was the BS part. I can't remember where I saw this, so it could be wrong, but the odor trapping bubble action that's seen on the ads is pretty close to what actually happens in real life. A lot of those psychology tricks and tips that you see online, just in general, a lot of them have no scientific proof, but they work because everyone thinks they do. This is how I actually live my life. I just tell myself things like these, don't research them, and placebo myself into changing my mindset or mood. You all should try it. It works. I'm a big believer in the saying, It's easier to act your way into a new way of thinking than it is to think your way into a new way of acting. How long it takes a Coinstar to process and count coins and return a receipt. It finishes quickly, so quickly that folks are skeptical of the accuracy. So a fake delay, with fake counting noises, was built in, giving folks more confidence in the results. That's amusing, and I absolutely believe it. A lot of scans do this as well. Not virus scans, those actually do take a huge amount of time. But sites that show you the best deals are often done in 100 milliseconds. They're not really doing anything that intensive, just make a few requests to an auto trader or whatever, which probably only returns 15 cars and sorts by the lowest price. But people wouldn't believe it was the best price if it came back instantly. They wouldn't think it looked hard enough, so they make them wait a little while. Not sure if it's really placebo, but there's research done on how a car door should sound when you close it. A flat and boring pank sound would do just fine, but a lot of people find that soft, plush, and yet firm sound reassures them that the door is actually closed. My friend's husband is a sound engineer. I don't know if that's the right term for this exact thing. His entire job is making sure the car stuff sounds right. I swear my car performs better immediately after it's cleaned. If Gran Turismo has taught me anything, it's that washing your car adds 5 to 10 horsepower. Beats headphones have weights inside them to make them heavier and give the illusion of quality and sturdiness. You should head over to the headphones Reddit. We can hook you up with a much lighter headphone with higher quality sound for much cheaper than Beats. That free shipping is a better deal. It generally means they've added the cost into the product instead, but you feel like you've gotten a better deal. This is 100% true. I used to sell furniture at a no-gimmicks kind of place where they were open about all the costs, including delivery. I'd do the math for people, show them how we were still saving them tons of money, even with delivery, but some people would still walk out and go pay literally hundreds of dollars more for free delivery from Ashley's. What? No, this can't be true. Large corporations are notoriously transparent and would never add an arbitrary cost disguised as shipping to items under a certain value in order to incentivize people to buy more. Next thing you'll be saying is that if these companies could employ literal indentured workers and outright lie about their components and ingredients, they'd be doing that too. When cake mixes first came out, you only had to add water to them, but too many housewives felt like it was cheating and wouldn't buy them. So the cake mix companies added another step, the eggs. It worked. Apparently, the cracking and adding of the eggs to the batter was enough to make it more homemade, and cake mixes became extremely popular. Well, now I'm mad. I've got probably 3 cake mixes in my pantry right now that I keep using all of my eggs before getting to make. If it weren't for those housewives, I'd have cake by now. Unbelievable. It doesn't do it anymore, but at one time Google Docs intercepted the Control-S shortcut and briefly changed the cursor to the thinking cursor, the hourglass or beach ball, whatever your computer needed, because you don't need to save your Google Docs. They save every tiny change on the server. But people are used to doing it, so they added that happy little illusion. I saw an article about how Apple Music made random selection less random, because people would often complain if the same artist would follow after a song, so they made an algorithm to not select a song made by the same artist until after some other songs. Controlled randomness, if you will. The exaggerated sounds of some vacuum cleaners, microwaves, and cars to make them sound powerful. The loading screens on some apps that make it seem like they're doing something complex. I once spoke to a guy involved in developing the first ATM cash machines. Early trials showed that users thought that the dispensing of cash happened too fast, and they didn't trust that it had correctly debited their account for the right amount. So they inserted a wait cycle to make it appear that the machine was counting the cash. That wait cycle is still there today in most machines. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? Your permanent record. Colleges care more about what you say on Twitter and Facebook than what you said to Dakota in 3rd grade. The only time your permanent record means something is if you transfer within the state. Bubbles in cleaning products. Early formulation of soap way back when used to naturally form suds. Newer formulations can clean better but don't naturally produce suds, as the bubbling was an incidental side effect that doesn't actually have any bearing on cleaning. When these newer soaps were first introduced, people complained that they didn't work because they didn't make loads of bubbles. So the manufacturers started adding a chemical solely to generate bubbles that didn't actually help with the cleaning at all, and all of the complaints stopped. To this day, the association of bubbles meaning clean is strong enough that they still do it. Basically, all cleaning products, including toothpaste, foam up when used, and almost without exception, the phone is just 100% marketing. Car doors should close really quietly, but they're designed to close loudly so you feel safe. It's not uncommon to have a loading screen or icon placed in queries, sometimes just because the average user doesn't expect it to be this quick. Intentional lag on websites when signing up or payment processing. How do I know this? I write code sometimes that does this. Airport security. Homeland Security's own inspectors were able to get illegal items through TSA checkpoints 70% of the time. But they'll be damned if you think you're going to get away with taking that water bottle or travel-sized bottle of lubricant on the plane, sir. That minty fresh, zesty, clean feeling you get from toothpaste. It started off as a marketing strategy and caught on, and now almost all toothpaste is mint because we associate the minty freshness with cleanliness. Milky or opaque white moisturizing body wash. It's the same as the clear ones. It's not more moisturizing, it just has white pigments in it. But because it's not clear, people associate it with lotion and think it's better for the skin. I'm not saying moisturizing body wash doesn't work, but you shouldn't assume it's more moisturizing just because it's white. A friend of mine who works at a big cosmetics company said the only difference in the formula of their normal and cream cleansers is white pigment. Instead of the color, check for gentle cleansing agents and ingredients like panthenol or oils. Wine prices. They've done studies that show people think wine tastes better if it costs more. But when they do a blind test, very few people, even people who are wine testers, can't distinguish between pretty cheap, like 15 to 20 bucks a bottle, and expensive wines. Not all of them, there are some people who can tell, but it's a pretty small percentage. Turkey doesn't have enough tryptophan to make you sleepy. You're most likely sleepy because you ate too much and your body's in rest and digest mode. It's a placebo when you eat a meal that includes turkey and you say you're tired, but you eat a meal of the same calories and conditions with chicken instead and you don't feel tired. It's conditioned into American culture because of overeating at American Thanksgiving. For some reason I thought this was about the country at first and I was very confused. Drinking Canada Dry Ginger Ale helps with an upset tummy. They were sued because their ginger ale has no ginger in it. And that was the only stuff that helped when I had a stomach flu as a kid. I got the stomach flu a lot too. Werner's, on the other hand, is basically a cure-all, and you can't convince me otherwise. When my younger brother was a kid, the doctor told him that sitting on a grocery bag would keep him from getting sick in the car. The real trick here, of course, is that if he does get sick, he has a bag to throw up into. He's in his 20s now, and he still doesn't believe me that it's just a trick, because it worked. Honestly, I would have thought that motion sickness would be one of those things that you couldn't cure with a placebo. Like, that's just something that's wrong with your equilibrium, right? Apparently not. Sometimes your brain is just making you feel ill in moving vehicles because you haven't paid enough attention to it for a while. What a jerk. When talking about lice, everybody starts to feel itchy. You're welcome, viewers. Who else mashed the down and A buttons on the DS or Game Boy when they were trying to catch a new Pokemon? Hey, screw you, that works! I install commercial audio and video systems. On bigger, more involved jobs like stadiums and arenas, we have AV consultants who don't work for my company, but are a big link in the chain as far as designing and EQing the finished system goes. I don't know how many times I've been up in an 80-foot boom lift and they want the azimuth or down angle of a speaker adjusted by some ridiculously small amount. So you go back up there and bang a couple of wrenches on the speaker and don't actually move anything, and you go, "How's that?" "Oh yeah, that sounds better." It works every goddamn time. Some of these consultants are just robbing us blind. When I was in my film major in college, our audio professor told us to have some spare cables on hand to wire up a dummy on the control board. Just a big obvious cord coming out of the controls and wired into nothing, stuffed behind an Apple box or something. "If it sounds perfectly fine to you," he said, "just twist or slide something on the dummy cable ever so slightly and play it again for the client. You'll find that gets rid of a lot of problems." Using gas with a higher octane rating than what the manufacturer recommends. "My car runs so much better on premium than regular." Yeah, right. Octane rating of gasoline is not a measurement of how much energy is in the fuel. It's a measurement of how resistant to pre-detonation it is. If the manufacturer says to use 87, putting 91 or 93 into the vehicle makes no difference. The car can't tell a higher octane fuel is being used. It can only tell if a lower octane fuel might be used by virtue of the knock sensor. If the sensor detects knocking or pinging, the computer will retard the timing to eliminate the knock. Pulling timing can reduce the amount of power the engine makes. The fuel map the computer uses to manage your engine is made for specific octane rating. On high-performance cars, the compression is higher and the timing is more aggressive. Therefore, high octane is necessary. If your car says it requires premium, use it. If it says recommended, regular can be used unless the vehicle is under heavy load. Don't spend 15% more on gas because your car feels like it runs better on premium. When I repair smartphone or computers, and if something takes me 10 minutes or less, I usually stall because the customer doesn't want to pay the agreed amount or want to haggle, because I did it too fast. So I let them wait 25 to 30 minutes, and then they'll pay happily. When I was working at a catering gig at my university, everybody eating off fancy plates at sit-down dinners in the ballrooms, we're talking fundraisers and receptions and every other formal dinner occasion that might be held at a university, they were eating the same bulk commercial-grade food that was served in the dorms, and they'd tell us to give their compliments to the chef. Lady, the only difference between your $40 reception plate pork chop and my $4 cafeteria pork chop was that mine came on a paper plate. And yes, I do happen to know where the chef gets his choice cuts. Aramark Food Services, just like everybody else. But you put that stuff on a gilded plate, they think it's the most wonderful thing they've eaten all year. A lot of the cold prevention medications, like Cold Effects or something similar, a test was done on some of them and they were found to often be not much more than a sugar pill. Also, those vitamin gummy bears. We studied them in school and they're often not much different than regular gummy bears. There are often not as many vitamins in them as they say. Most of the ones that are good for hair and nails, people say they work, but that's because it's the gelatin that's good for your hair and nails. I just want to clarify there are definitely some that are better than others. I couldn't tell you which brands, but my understanding of it is it's usually better to take either an actual vitamin pill or eat food that's higher in the vitamin you're looking for. Many of the gummies contain some sort of processed sugar, so it's seen as a less healthy option. I guess you don't have to completely write them off, but there are definitely many of them that are BSing people. For men, the idea that shaving their beard makes it grow thicker. That's not the case. Shaving only makes all hair grow at the same rate, giving the illusion that more or new hair is growing, when in reality it's not. Yes, this is true with all hair, and women also go through similar situations of being berated with people telling them fallacies about hair. I'd only thought of beard thickness when I typed that. Kissing a boo-boo. What? No! Branded painkillers. Cheap stuff is normally exactly the same and does the same thing. Laugh tracks. They do make you enjoy a show more and serve some other purposes. They added them to the show MASH because so many people didn't realize it was supposed to be a comedy. Fun fact, laugh tracks were introduced in the first place because audio engineers kept having to edit out some audience reactions during post-production. TV execs found it saved them money, and so the laugh track was born. I have tried watching even shows that I do like with the laugh track removed, and they are awful. Those pauses are just surreal and haunting. Why yes, I am the highly suggestible type, why do you ask? Dislikes on YouTube comments. They don't change the score, but they give them less visibility, or so I heard. You're not acting like an insane person because you ate sugar. Yep, even for kids. They aren't acting wild because they ate sugar. They're acting wild because A, you told them that's what could happen when they eat sugar. B, most of the time that they have an opportunity to eat a bunch of sugar, it's while they're doing something fun and exciting, like a birthday party or trick-or-treating. I remember Super Nanny doing a test on this in a documentary. She threw a kid's party, gave half the kids sugary snacks and half healthy snacks, and the parents had to guess what their kid was given. Almost all of them were wrong. The idea that drinking orange juice shortly before going to bed will keep you from sleeping because of the vitamin C? The same people who swear that it works like coffee on them eat raw tomatoes for dinner all summer long and never complain about sleeping issues, even though tomatoes contain more vitamin C than a glass of OJ. Multi-level marketing schemes. People seem to feel successful in them when they're in fact losing all their money. I hate this side of the badge. Cops admit the rules they think are totally wrong. The cops in my town carry nickels and feed the meters instead of taking the time to write tickets. The cops in my town hide behind the corners and wait for the meter to run out so they can sprint to your car and slam a ticket on it. Before I was a police officer, I was put in a sort of catch-all position, police service officer. Duties included evidence, custodian, animal control, court bailiff, code enforcement, and part-time police work. This is 2012-2013. Kansas had rather a wet season. For about a month and a half straight, we had rain almost every day. Nobody had the chance to mow their grass. The city manager saw it as a grand opportunity for me to start writing people tickets for their grass being too high. I told him I didn't feel comfortable doing that. When asked why, I told him I didn't think it was right for me to write tickets for tall grass when there were city-owned properties all over the city that had grass just as tall. We went back and forth. He got my captain involved and threw a fit. Before he stomped out of the captain's office, he made the comment, "This is my city, you work for me, and what I say is law." The captain agreed that he was a butthole, but ultimately said I should just write the tickets. So I went back to the evidence locker, what everyone called my business because I was the only one who had access, and I did some research. An hour later, I walked over to the city manager's office, which happened to be right across the street from me, and I handed him about 14 tickets. He asked what those were for. I told him I was doing exactly what he told me to do. I was writing tickets for grass being too tall. The first 14 tickets were for the 14 city-owned properties that had grass over 12 inches high. He said those weren't his responsibility. I calmly reminded him of his previous comment about him owning the city, and he called the chief. He insisted I be fired for insubordination. A month later, I was promoted to full-time patrol officer. This happened 7 or 8 years ago. I was eventually fired for reasons I won't get into. All I will say is I obviously wasn't going to be the type of police officer they wanted me to be, so they made an example out of me. I worked for a city station in Australia that fully expected that we'd give tickets to people for being homeless or begging for money. These tickets were $600 a pop at least. I pretty much refused to give them out because it felt barbaric. Like homeless people didn't already have it rough enough without getting a $600 ticket, which if they didn't pay, they'd turn into a court case and warrant. How are they going to pay it anyway? The only point to it seemed to be to kick them while they were down. Plus, begging for money is a summary offence here. Not an indictable offence, and we have some discretion for summary offences, meaning the superior officers wanted us to be absolute C-words for the sake of it. I was in charge of training new recruits at the time, and I thought it was better to demonstrate compassion to them and teach them what services were available to the homeless, and when, how to get them fast-tracked into emergency housing, and what places would offer free food. I transitioned out of that station because I was getting tired of getting crap for not giving people crap. Yeah, I mean, honestly, those tickets are just going to cause someone else to spiral even further into the situation they're in, regardless of how they got there. What's the logical conclusion to finding people with no money who have nowhere else to go? Prison and indentured servitude? What kind of world are we trying to build here? I was an Air Force cop. Hated taking cell phones from people from the flight line. Flight line is where the jets sit, they're worked on, and they launch out of their parking spots, if you want to call them that. It's surrounded by a red line that you aren't allowed to cross unless you have a special badge and security clearance. You're not supposed to have your phone because you can't take pictures of the flight line in case an enemy gets a hold of them and learns where they're kept and what buildings to attack. It's an arrestable offense and you could lose ranks and stuff. Every single cop has their phone on them on the flight line, I can guarantee it. I was working security for a low-income housing facility. The people that ran this place had a little scam they did where they'd turn off the fobs of tenants, so tenants couldn't open the front door. It was $35 to get the fob turned back on. There were 400 tenants at the complex. At any one time, a quarter of the fobs might be turned off. I was working the front desk, and if a tenant had turned off a fob, I wasn't supposed to let them in. I'd let them in anyway, and I got fired. Oh, and another thing they did, since most of the tenants didn't have bank accounts and paid with money orders, management would lose 3 or 4 months' worth of money orders. Then they'd give the tenant an eviction notice for failure to pay rent. If the tenants had the receipts and paperwork, management would suddenly, miraculously find the money orders, let the tenant stay, but still charge tenant a few months of late fees. Holy crap, I totally understand wanting to just leave this behind you, but the crap you're describing is getting pretty atrocious, and this is just from what you know. Please try to at least make an effort to do the right thing. Hit back on the internet if things turn sour. There's a fair amount of actual lawyers who may provide assistance if it comes to it. Godspeed, sir. Most town and city ordinances. Things like not being able to park on the street in front of your house between certain hours of the night. Screw that. You want me to ticket some dad's car because he moved it out of the driveway so his 5-year-old son could bike around the driveway? Yeah, that's not happening. Also, certain traffic violations in the middle of the night. You forgot to signal your merge when you're the only vehicle on a 2-lane road at 3 a.m.? Well, God help us all. Recently expired driving licenses and plates. A neighboring city wrote a car whose plates expired 11 minutes prior. Cue bewildered Jacksonville Jaguars fan gif. The cop said the person should have known it was about to expire and taken care of it ahead of time. Oh, fudge right off. We've all had life interfere with things. There's a huge difference between letter of the law and spirit of the law. I'd say that I'm probably just a terrible cop, but my coffee mug says I'm the world's best policeman, so it's definitely not that. I'm not a police officer, but I work in environmental regulation and enforcement, and I have powers of constabulary, UK-based. There are pretty much 4 types of people I deal with. First is the business owners who treat regulations and the law like a game. Sometimes you can get away with flouting it and save or make yourself a little bit of money. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, but it's not personal. Then there's the people who go out to flout the law because investigating environmental crime is relatively under-resourced and it's a good way to launder money. Third is the farmers who are too tight or skint to pay to ensure their farm infrastructure doesn't kill an entire river. And finally, we have the homeowners who are simply having a crap day and something goes wrong like an oil leak or their septic systems break down. Types 1, 2, and 3 are absolutely fair game to go after. You own a business? It's your responsibility to make sure you stick to the law. Type 4 though? Okay, technically, yeah, you've just discharged 1,000 liters of oil from your oil tank into a river. But let's be honest, that's in no one's interests. Why on earth would I hammer someone like that for technically breaking the law when they've already got enough headache of replacing that oil, remediating the land, replacing the tank, yada yada. Yeah, we'll recover our costs because that's fair, but I'm not about to throw the book at someone for being unlucky. I had a very brief stint as a deputy sheriff a handful of years ago. I struggled a lot with situations in which addicts were criminalized. There was one man who I remember who had been out on patrol but got caught with substances in his system. Because of the failed test, he was getting sent back to jail, and unfortunately I was the one who had to take him there. It crushed me. It was an older guy who clearly didn't mean to cause trouble and clearly didn't want to be in the situation. He needed treatment, not jail time. We also had a lot of people come through who were using synthetic stuff, like bath salts when nobody knew what they were, and Bath & Body Works took their bath salts off the shelves. It was frightening to see some of our frequent flyers come back to us more and more incoherent because of these and the permanent damage they were causing. But the truly heartbreaking moment was when I was transporting a young black man who was in for many Mary J possessions, and he said, "The next time I'm using that synthetic crap, your tests can't see that in my system." I went full-on mama bear and I told him, basically begged him, not to mess with that stuff, and I relayed some of the things I'd seen. I have no way of knowing if he ever listened to me, but I really, really hope he did. Ultimately, my experience in this job changed my intended career path. I'd been planning on staying in law enforcement for a chunk of time and then going to law school. I even had judges ready to write recommendation letters and a solid LSAT practice test score. But to see so many stupid and morally debased laws being upheld simply because that was the precedent didn't sit well with me. So I left that job and became a documentary filmmaker instead. Much less lucrative, but a more immediate way to work for justice. I suppose spreading awareness is probably the important first step in combating addiction. If the current line is just to lock them up, fine them, and drive them into the arms of these other more harmful substances, it's a respectful choice. I hope it's all going well. My best bud, I've known him for 20 years, and his entire family are all cops. Dad, mum, sister, and 2 brothers, all cops. Anyway, I have dinner with them from time to time, and I recall one time his brother was discussing having to go to monitor a protest with all the other cops in their riot gear. I was fascinated that every cop at the table had the same reaction of hating protests for different reasons. One person said it was boring and you have to stand all day. Another said it sucks when the people you're protecting start yelling at you. And his mum, who was a dispatcher, said it diminishes responsibility because all the cops were tied up at the protest and that means less patrols elsewhere. Bottom line is, I found out that cops hate protesters. This is true. I worked a few rallies for folks who we'll call modern Third Reich enthusiasts back in the late 70s. Think the Blues Brothers movie. These guys hated the cops, and the crowd hated them, and we were in a formation in between the two. The protesters would throw things at these scumbags like eggs, tomatoes, and M80s. Trouble is, most people can't throw for crap, and we'd get pelted with this stuff or have an M80 blow up right next to us. Protests suck big time. A buddy of mine used to be a cop and he said he never got anyone for green herb because it's too much hassle and it'll be legal soon anyway. What do you mean the suspect had 5 kilos of grass? I only saw 4. Wow, these criminals are really out here with only 3 kilos of Mary J? All that paperwork just to enter these 2 kilos of green herb into evidence. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? You know, I've had a few good experiences with reasonable cops over the years. One time I was rolling into a small town in western New York in a snowstorm, and I had a radar detector on the dash. I see a cop coming the other way and whoop! I look down and I'm going 32 in a 25 zone. I look in the mirror and he flips around and I just pulled over and waited for him to catch up. He gets out and says, "You're going a little fast back there. Why do you pull over?" I said, "Roads are slick. Didn't want you to have to catch up to me." He goes back and runs my plate, comes back and shoots the breeze with me for a couple of minutes and says, "You have a good day. Get out of the snow." A friend of mine's a cop in a small town in western New York. He's told me before how much he hates having to chase people. And people who know they're the reason the cop put his lights on and just pull over right away are much less likely to get a ticket. I had a run-in with the cops a few years ago where they could have easily taken me for at the very least public intoxication, but they cut me a break and gave me a ride home instead. Made me feel like they didn't want to take some drunk idiot to jail when he was just trying to get home and sleep. I'd taken a cab back from a work party and I was pretty drunk. My friend and I had just moved into this new apartment, so I accidentally gave the cab driver the wrong address. I ended up on a block that looked very similar to mine and a building that looked exactly like mine. There were 2 doors before getting to my apartment door, which was on the first floor. Like my apartment building, they left the first door unlocked and locked the second door. I kept trying my keys to open it, but I couldn't, and I was confused. I went outside to look for my car, and it wasn't parked there. That's when I realized I was on the wrong block. I started walking in the direction I thought my apartment was when a cop car pulls up. They ask me what I'm doing, and I tell them, "I'm really drunk and I just want to go home," which was the honest truth. They told me they got a call about someone trying to get into an apartment building. I guess the people in that building woke up and thought I was trying to break in. They were super suspicious of me at first, but eventually it became clear that I was just some drunk idiot and not a burglar. They ran me through to make sure I didn't have warrants or anything, and when I checked out, they offered me a ride home. The ride back was hilarious because when we were getting to my apartment, I tried telling them that it was a bit complicated to get to because of all the one-way streets. The officer driving was like, "Who do you think you're with?" and then turned on the lights and went the wrong way down the street to get me home faster. It honestly felt like I was with the 2 cops from Superbad. This took place in Canada. When an alcoholic is placed on conditions not to consume alcohol, it feels like a real jerk move to charge them with breaching conditions if the only offense they're committing is the consumption breach. On the other hand, it makes for a great additional charge you can slap on buttholes who are, for example, beating their spouses while drunk. My dad is an officer, and in my state, the police and state patrol officers do not have a minimum quota for tickets they have to write. In fact, it's illegal here for a superior officer to tell the lower-ranking officers to write X amount of tickets. This has a point, I promise. So a while ago, one of my dad's co-workers was being told by a superior officer, "You're not writing enough tickets. You need to write more of them." The officer replied, "Yes, sir," and wrote the superior officer a ticket for telling him to write more tickets. It's the best story I've ever heard from my dad about his job. I know it sounds like the most fake thing in the world, but I swear it's true. Yep, incentivizing cops to prioritize the money-making practices above the ones that save lives is not the way to go. I wonder if even though your beat cop dad didn't have any such directive, his superior did have some such goal from above. One of my friends was a military police officer, and a majority of his domestic disputes were because of the wives. But he was always forced to remove the male spouse or the service member spouse in the instance of gay couples, or remove the higher-ranked spouse if both were in the service. The case that really made him want to quit being an MP was our mutual friend had a domestic disturbance called to his house, and his wife, who everyone who'd ever met her knew she was a straight-up B-word and hated everyone. Well, she had started arguing with her husband, and that had led to her throwing stuff, anything in arm's reach, at him. He started to record this, and he was still charged with domestic violence even though he'd never hit her or anything. And he had to spend 24 hours locked up in a ward in the hospital because he needed almost 30 stitches total and had a pretty bad concussion. Both friends have since left the military. The one with the DV charge has been divorced from his ex, thank God. He also got the charges thrown out because of the video footage. My friend, the military police, is now a social worker for domestic attack survivors. He assists in how to obtain protective orders, emergency housing, and even name changes. I'm a 911 call taker. Any kind of petty, non-emergency call where someone isn't directly bothering anyone is the most obnoxious kind of call you have to put in for us. If you call in to report teenagers skating, people smoking green herb, or a party going on at 3 p.m. on a Wednesday, there's almost a 90% chance at least one person is insulting you on the other end of the phone for it. If it's not us, it's the dispatchers or the police themselves. Riding bikes on empty pavements. If there's pedestrians on it, then yeah, sure, use the road. But if it's completely empty, why not use it? It's a lot safer than riding on the road. I've never arrested anyone for green herb possession, nor would I unless forced to. I've never been faced with it, but as long as it isn't in everyone's face, I'd never charge working girls either. You never know why they've had to resort to that line of work. I'm not a cop, but my dad is. We recently had a whole discussion about mandatory arrest laws, where if two people got into an argument where someone was hurt and had a prior relationship, cousins, ex-boyfriends or girlfriends, the officer has to arrest someone. This stemmed from a long history of men whacking their spouses, the spouses calling the police and the men saying that everything was cool, and smoothing it over with a popo. And these laws we've mentioned work great in domestic situations because cops would tend to side with the man, but not great in other situations. Where my dad disagrees is in these other situations. Say you and your boys are out downtown for a night of drinking and games when you beat one of your friends in a game of darts. Your friend gets upset that you beat him and starts yelling. You yell back, of course, and your friend hits you. The bartender calls the cops and gets you bread and water, and you and your friend sober up. By the time the cops get there, your friend and you have kissed and made up, and everything is good between you. However, because the two of you are friends, the police must arrest someone by law. With these laws, a little argument over darts turns into a night in jail and a criminal record. And it gets worse. Because your friend and you have a prior relationship, this misdemeanor turns into a felony aggravated assault, and you're now a convicted felon. Lots of college-age boys have had their lives ruined by these laws, and for this reason, my dad disagrees. I refuse to enforce speeding under 15 miles per hour unless it's a school zone with kids visible. 5-mile-per-hour tickets make me sick. I also, as long as they're being cool with me, do not like to enforce suspension for non-payment when I'm stopping them on their way to work. Why punish someone with a fine and tow fees when they're actively doing something to fix the problem? To this date, I have yet to write for a headlight or rear light being out. 3+ months minimum for expired plates, but even then, as long as they're cool, it's just a warning or courtesy notice, since the state will fine them anyways. A fine from me and the state is just excessive, in my opinion. Noise and curfew types of ordinances, given the situation. Example, if you're called for a loud noise at a park, 10 p.m. and it ends up being the teens playing a very competitive volleyball game. Technically the park is closed and they are violating noise ordinances, however, they're sober, as far as I can tell, and just having a genuinely good time. Long story short, I drive into the park and pull up on the side and get out of my car. Not a sound from anyone, and they all freeze and stare at me until I said, "I thought you could use some more light," and I activated my floodlight so they could see better. I stayed there and wrote my reports for an hour. The people who called about them suck. Teenagers not out partying or doing other things that could endanger themselves or others is a great thing. There's more, but those are the ones that come to mind first. As a guy who used to stay next to a park where people would just noisily play volleyball from 4 p.m. through midnight every summer night, I must admit I feel some aggression to noisy gatherings of that exact sort, but I guess on balance I don't think kids should be arrested or booked for something that's way better than doing substances or booze at parties. In the grand internet tradition of not quite answering the question right, I dated a girl whose father was a cop. He'd always tell us where the butthole cops were patrolling on any given night we were going out. Hey, stay the frick out of Whitefish tonight, guys. Good dude. Psycho daughter, but a good dude. I hope he's well. A buddy of mine's dad is pretty high up in his local police force in Canada. Anyway, they stopped enforcing possession laws regarding marijuana years before legalization. It was just too much of a trouble, a waste of time. They still go after dealers and the like, but anyone who happened to be possessing when booked gets a chance to chuck it or the like. It's just a waste of time to the cops there. Back in the day when I was in the popo in the state prisons, I was expected to write people up that had fresh tattoos. That's the stupidest thing ever. I just pulled them to the side and told them not to let me see it again, and I made them mop the day room. I've been an officer for 15 years, and there's a few things I disagree with. First is public intoxication. If you're smart enough to know you're too drunk to drive and are walking home instead, I'm not writing you up. Odds are I'll give you a ride home so you don't end up as a roadkill. Or DWIs if you're sleeping it off in your car, even if the keys are in the ignition or in your pocket. Again, if you're smart enough to know you're too drunk to drive, I'm not going to write you a ticket. Open container. If you're the designated driver and driving drunks home, I don't care if your friends are still drinking. I've been the DD and been drunk with a DD. I know there's times you can't keep a group of rowdy drunks from drinking. Noise ordinance. If you're having a get-together and the neighbors call because the party is too loud, I'll generally give you a warning to quiet it down, and I'll write you a ticket if I have to come back. I work in a small, rural community where 75% of the people are low income with little to no education. A large portion of them lack a high school diploma. Most of them are trying to squeak by on a job where they barely make minimum wage, so I don't really feel like giving them a crippling fine for these little things. Basically, I don't like being a jerk cop, and I'll usually give someone a warning for the first offense on something minor. The city aldermen have complained repeatedly about me not writing several more summons when I've been on a call, but I've stressed to them repeatedly that the police department is for keeping the city safe and secure. It will not be used as a revenue-generating machine. Conversely, if you're someone that I have constant issues with, or if you're doing something stupid that's seriously jeopardizing public safety, I'm going to write you tickets until my hand cramps. They really thought this would work. The dumbest scams caught by staff. Years ago, I worked at a Walmart, and this guy came in trying to return his Wii that apparently doesn't work. I just kind of bought this for my kids last week and it's already broken, but they won't take it back because I lost my receipt. The Wii in question was the most beat-up and disgusting-looking GameCube I've ever seen, like he found it in a landfill or something. I should also point out that I wasn't working the return desk or even a cashier. I was stocking the food department. Turns out he was trying to talk every employee in the store into either giving him a refund or a Wii. Years ago, I worked at a small hardware store where they were constantly getting huge rolls of copper wire stolen. One day, this guy and his girlfriend came in to return a roll. I was a few months in on the returns counter. They had no receipt, and when I scanned the item for the return, it was only doing the price per foot. I couldn't figure out how to get the price for the whole roll. I called the manager, and he comes out and right away knows there's no way these people bought a roll and returned it. So he asks when they bought it, and they say 2 weeks ago, the common response. And my manager tells them, oh really, because the last time we sold an entire roll was over 3 months ago. The guy starts to get brave and tells him, so, you're saying I stole it? And my manager says, yes. They end up leaving and left the roll behind. Before they leave the store, the guy says, I'm coming back and bringing the cops. Manager says, go ahead, that way you can explain to them how you stole the roll. My company strings miles of copper wire and has lots of it stolen. We get calls from the local scrap yards asking us to send our police over, because our crap has the company name stamped into the copper every 10 feet, and the company offers a reward to the scrap yards for turning in thieves. You'd think people would learn, but we get one every few weeks. Worked in a bottle shop. One afternoon, a shady character entered and spent 10 minutes browsing the liquor section. I stayed at the checkout and watched him on the CCTV. He ended up shoving 2 bottles of Johnny Walker Blue down his pants and walked out. Store policy is not to confront shoplifters. That's what insurance is for. I called the police and burnt the footage onto a DVD for them to collect. About an hour later, the same guy returns with the bottles demanding a cash refund because he purchased the wrong type. Just as I was telling him I can't do a refund without a receipt, the police walked in to collect the footage. He left with them in handcuffs. I had a guy walk in and try to return a phone case because, I quote, I got the wrong one. No receipt, of course, and when he said that, I said, you stole what? He just kind of walked out briskly and then full-on sprinted away. He left the case there. I love that last one. I can't even feel angry about him for the crime because he's literally incapable of being anything other than a rubbish criminal. It's almost cute, really. We don't deliver the pizzas we make. It's carry-out only. I had a customer call and have a long, angry conversation with me because I wouldn't deliver to her. She proceeds to say a couple of times, you must be new here. I know the owner personally. To which I responded, well, I'm the owner's daughter and we don't deliver. Sold a guy a phone years ago when I worked for a wireless carrier. Spent an hour getting all of his information transferred and I set up his new phone. He comes in the next day with a shattered screen. Apparently he didn't remember that I was the rep who helped him, and he proceeded to tell me that this was how it looked when he left the store. Needless to say, the phone was not replaced. Guy comes in to fill his son's Adderall script. Guy is real twitchy and his son is chill as could be. For all controls, we're supposed to run a report that shows everywhere in the state they've filled any. Of course, the report is a mess. Multiple pharmacies, multiple scripts, multiple doctors, all the red flags. And to top it all off, the Adderall script within that week had been filled, so we couldn't really fill this one. Dad comes back and we tell him that we can't fill it, and he starts going on about how his wife must have filled it, but they need some for today, blah, blah, blah. We decline, and his last words to us are, my son needs them for a birthday he has to go to today. Can't you help? No, dude, we can't help. You're clearly taking your son's pills. Get help and stop using your son to get a fix of prescription substances. A woman came in, grabbed a herb-roasted rotisserie chicken, moseyed over to the casual seating, and ate 85% of it with her bare hands, and then brought the carcass to customer service and tried to return it. A customer bought back a jumpsuit for a refund because it had number 2 in it. Apparently, it had been like that when she bought it. It stank so bad that you could smell it through the taped-up plastic bags that she had put it in. The levels of how impossible that would have been to go unnoticed by changing room staff, to then be put on the shop floor, to then be picked up by the customer, to being bought via a cashier still unnoticed? The worst part is some idiot on the refunds counter downstairs actually accepted it and put it on top of the trolley full of other returned items for us to put back upstairs, complete with a note stapled to it that said, "Warning, feces inside." One of the bigger what the frick moments I've had in any job that I've worked. I worked 12 years before I switched occupations. One retail store I worked at used to have a return it for whatever reason policy, and you didn't have to have a frickin' receipt. A couple tried to return a pot and pan set because the Teflon was coming off. Brand new cookware with the Teflon already coming off after only one single use? How odd. I've got to see this. Yeah, about that. There was badly burnt food in the bottom of the pans and someone had used something sharp to try and scrape it out, hence the Teflon peeling. The store took it back. Another customer brought back swim trunks because they were the wrong size or whatever. Returns desk accepted them and refunded the customer. The person working in clothing that day went out to examine them to ensure they were okay to put back out in the line and, yeah, I feel the pain of the last story because these swim trunks were immediately sent for rubbish and written off because of pretty much the same reason that jumpsuit was. I used to work at Best Buy. This guy came in and returned a laptop saying that the box had some old laptop in it. He was yelling and screaming that we don't know how to do business. The manager gave him a full refund. We started to check that old laptop he bought in. It wouldn't turn on. Looks like the motherboard was toasted. We pulled the hard drive out and started checking the data. Hard drive was completely fine with everything on it. We started looking for the clues and found pictures of the guy who returned the laptop. It was his old machine. We had all of his info. The managers called him and said he has 15 minutes to bring the new laptop back or he's calling the police. The guy came in, dropped off the laptop at the front desk, and we never saw him again in the store. I'd like to return this unopened pack of cigarettes I purchased earlier today at your establishment. I might be paraphrasing that a little. I open the store every day. I hadn't seen this guy once that day. I looked at his cigarettes, and it was a brand we don't carry. I asked him for a receipt to confirm that he'd purchased them here, but he obviously didn't have one. Oh, that's fine. If you can just tell me what time you were in here today, I can look it up on our cameras to confirm your purchase. My God, the backpedaling and stuttering. I grabbed his cigarette pack and fake examined them. Wait a minute, sir. Are you sure you purchased these at this store? I don't think we carry this brand. He took the cigarettes back, came up with something about how his brother must have, and yada yada, and then he walked out. You see, a tobacco store in town sells some of the brands we carry at a much cheaper price. So people like to try and do returns at our store to make a quick buck. We generally don't take any returns on tobacco, but this guy didn't even scope out his mark. I'm a resident of Indiana. Couldn't find anything pertaining to the legality of tobacco returns in my state. If it helps, anytime the ATF drops in for a checkup, the only question we get asked is if we sell individual cigarettes. Outside of that, I've worked a few retail jobs where tobacco was sold, and I wasn't told at any of them that tobacco returns were illegal. I'm assuming it's more individual store policy on whether or not they take returns, and I've worked retail long enough to see how an employee would tell someone it's illegal, rather than against store policy just to help avoid an argument. Not to say it might not be illegal in other states, just that I don't think it is in mine. I had a customer return a vacuum cleaner once. My supervisor did the return, thankfully. The box went back on the floor unchecked. The next customer who wanted to buy it checked it out before they went to the register. The whole frickin' thing had been replaced with a catering-sized tin of beetroot. Gotta hand it to them for putting some effort into replacing the item inside the box with the most obscure equivalent weight that they could find for that particular scam. And it seems like that other customer cared more about quality control than you guys did. Not that I can blame you. At my old job, they used to have sales pretty often and would also give out coupons for specific dates. For Boxing Day, they had a 30% off sale and would also give out coupons that would start the next day. Lady comes in on Boxing Day and we worked out that she'd get more of a deal if she used the coupon instead, so I offered to hold her items for her, and I explicitly told her she wouldn't be able to get the 30% off, and she decided to use the coupon instead. She comes back the next day, goes to purchase her items, and gets angry because they wouldn't give her both the 30% off and let her use the coupon. She told the cashier that the person she had spoken to the day before had told her she could do that. Sees me and says, "It was that girl who told me." I went to cash to speak to her. I was a key holder at the time, and her story changed about 3 times through the whole spiel. First she said that I'd told her she had combined the discounts, then she said I'd never told her she couldn't combine the discounts, and then finally it was, well, I don't understand why I'm not able to do this. Another manager came over to help sort it out, and as I walked away I heard her saying that I was a liar. Now I work at Sephora, and we always get people trying to return fake products. My favorite one was when someone returned a face mask but had put a can of tuna in the box instead of the actual face mask. I used to work at Sephora, and the amount of people that would try to return empty or mostly empty gift sets was absurd. The look on their face when you'd ask where all the products were was always priceless. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? I work at a movie theater. We have a $5 discount day. A customer comes over and starts telling me how she was there the prior day and that we'd given them the wrong soda and her diabetic husband had drunk it and suddenly had to go to the hospital to get medication to cure him. Several things wrong with that story. First, that's not how diabetes work. You don't die from 1 sip of soda, and generally if you did, you'd have insulin to take. 2, the employee she'd complained to in order to call me over had been the only concessionist the prior day, and somehow the customer had failed to identify him when I asked her who it was. I asked her for a ticket stub or proof of purchase and she came up with nothing. I went to the attendants for the prior day and pulled the report for the movie they claimed to have seen. To my delight, the showtime they claimed to have seen had 0 tickets sold to it. I printed the report and went back to meet them. Yeah, sorry, looks like there were 0 tickets sold to that showtime, and I showed her the report. She then tried to say we sold her the tickets to the wrong movie. I told her that was impossible because then she would have been in the wrong auditorium. She had no response to that. Then she spluttered that she guessed she would just go and buy tickets. And I said, yep, guess so. She left. I was working in a betting shop during the 2014 World Cup. We had this one really awful customer, must have been in his 80s and was always wildly inappropriate, asking what color my underwear was, did I need someone to keep me warm tonight, etc. But I couldn't do anything as the higher-ups wanted to squeeze money from him. Anyway, the night before the final match, he came in and told me he wanted to bet on Germany to win. I spent about 10 minutes explaining to him that as it was the final, he could no longer have a broad bet like that. Instead, he'd have to choose between a 90-minute win or winning in extra time or on penalties. I showed him the odds for all of the different bets, and he ended up choosing the 90-minute win. I put the bet through him, and off he went into the night to be creepy somewhere else. The match played out, and of course Germany wins in extra time. The next day, unnamed creepy dude comes in grinning from ear to ear and telling me how he's a winner. Oh boy. Again, I have to explain to him that his bet isn't valid as he predicted they'd win before 90 minutes. And they hadn't. Of course, he flies into a rage about how I'm a money-grabbing working girl who's jealous of his riches and I have to pay him or he'll call the cops. I tell him to leave my store or I'll call them myself. And he actually complies. Then a few days later, I come back from my lunch break to see him ranting at my cashier, and I ask what the problem is, and he throws me his bet slip from the World Cup. Only now he's written extra time on it in pen, and he's trying to get my less experienced staff member to pay him out. I tell him that when we scan bets, the computer takes an image of it, and obviously the slip he's given to us has been altered as it doesn't match what's on the screen. I even turned the computer to show him. What he's doing counts as fraud. I mentioned this. Again, he leaves, spouting nonsense about how women shouldn't be working anyway because they can't count or read. Next day, I get told I have to go to a meeting, as I've had a complaint filed against me by a customer. The day of the meeting rolls around and I'm greeted by my area manager, the security director, and the same creepy dude. He had phoned the customer line and said I'd refused to pay his ticket and taken the money for myself. We ended up bringing up the CCTV of the night that he'd originally placed the bet, complete with audio to prove without a shadow of a doubt that he was in the wrong. The guy won't accept this and starts screaming that we're all thieves. We faked the video and he's threatening to get a lawyer. Security director escorts him off the premises and he's banned from all of our chains indefinitely. The kicker is, if his bet had won, it would have been a whopping £55. In short, old dude is creepy, refuses to accept that his bet isn't a winner, makes threats and escalates to head office, and is banned from all of our stores. What the actual crap? So was the guy actually rich and just even more insufferable in that he needed the money to feel worthwhile, or was he lying about his riches as well? It does seem like his grasp on reality was pretty tenuous to begin with. You probably lost a lot of money due to the loser having to go elsewhere though. I worked at a jewel many years ago. Opening shift as a cashier, a man comes through with two 24-packs of Pepsi. It's opening shift, so at that time we count our registers and confirm they've got the correct opening cash. We didn't carry too much cash, and we all know how much is in the drawer to start with. He ends up paying with a $100 bill for these sodas. I counted back his change with mostly 20s, all the 20s I'd just counted. There were no more of them left in the till that I could have given him. And I don't know how he did it, but he shuffled them in his hand and showed me that I was supposedly shortchanging him. Now I knew immediately that he was a piece of crap. My store wasn't run by buttholes, so I told him that I'd call a manager over and have them double-check the register. The manager came, counted down the register, and explained that the drawer was balanced, which means I didn't shortchange anybody. But if, for whatever reason, the drawer turned up $20 over at night, we'd give him a call. The manager tries to take his info down and he asks for his name, and the guy thinks about it and says, Steve Bush. Fudge you, Steve Bush. You're a sack of lying crap who tries to scam 16-year-old kids out of $20. We're responsible for how much money we lose. Just yesterday, I had a till tapper, or a quick change artist, try to money shuffle me for what would have been a grand sum of $5. It teed him off when I wouldn't play his game. The next best was someone calling wanting to know if we had spare empty boxes for Xbox consoles, because apparently he wanted to prank his kid and give him an empty box. I know very well he wanted to try and stuff the box with who knows what and attempt a return. Of course, the folks at customer service check such boxes for actual products and match serials to those on the box. I had a customer come to purchase some stuff, and they found a coupon from 3 years ago on Google Images for 50% off her whole purchase. I told her I can't do that, and the only one we had going at the time wasn't viable for her purchase. She yelled stupidly loudly, stormed out cursing, and I felt good. She emailed corporate, and I got in trouble for making her upset. I once had a lady come in and try to price match an ad that looked faded and had weird graphics. I told her I needed to see the date on it, and she got mad. Turns out it was faded and had weird graphics on it because it was over a decade old. She threatened to sue my manager and I for discrimination, and then for trashing her antique because we threw the ad out. I don't miss retail. Oh boy, back in high school when I worked part-time at KFC, there was this one fat man who'd come in, order a 2-piece quarter pack, and then claim we forgot his chicken. Like when we turned around to fetch his drink at the end of the order, he'd open the box, take out the chicken pieces, and hide them in his pockets. Hot chicken, right in his pockets. I got so fed up with everyone just giving him extra chicken all the time that I demanded he turn out his pockets one day when he tried to pull it, and wow, lo and behold, this guy has his pockets full of drumsticks. September 12, 2001. A guy in Spartanburg, South Carolina calls and says that his grass trimmer was in the Twin Towers in New York City the day before and got destroyed by the plane, and demanded that I replace it under warranty. I've heard that at least one divorce came out of the attack. The guy worked in one of the towers and his wife called, terrified, asking where he was, and he said, "I'm at work," when he was in fact with his mistress. He wasn't aware that his work didn't exist anymore. Maybe it doesn't strictly count as a scam, but I had a teenage boy come to the store and say he had no money, but needed contraceptive desperately for tonight or he wouldn't lose his V-plates. I really felt for the dude, so I ended up buying him some myself. Telling me she had a voucher for 50% off in her emails, but she didn't have a copy with her. I was like, "No, hun, nice try." Used to work customer service at a hardware store. You get so jaded by junkies trying to return stolen items, I just started handing out refunds based on how good the stories were. Your dad with dementia bought circuit breakers every single day and recently died? Refund. You don't need these commercial-sized copper elbows because you bought too many for your residential plumbing project? Nah. Idiot comes in with a coupon for a free iPod. The fine print says, guaranteed and payable by Bill Gates. I ask why Bill Gates would guarantee an Apple product, and the idiot left. Again, I find it hard to actually hold aggression in my heart for that one. It is weird, I know, but there's a level of stupidity and incompetence that I think is weirdly adorable. Maybe because this reminds me of something a young child with a tenuous grasp of the outside world would try to pull. I'm not usually on the register, but when the store I used to work at, PetSmart, first opened, they'd send out coupons to specific people if they had pet perks and an email. Well, someone shared their coupon online, which was for a free bag of dog food. What preceded was a mess of people coming in the next few weeks attempting and succeeding to redeem the coupon, as we didn't want to start off on the wrong foot after newly opening. So anyway, I got put on register and this woman comes through with 12 bags of dog food and 12 coupons. We can't actually do that in the same purchase, and usually when someone does that, i.e. having 2 coupons, we just do it on 2 different transactions. It's whatever. But this lady has 12 and I'm lazy, so I call my manager over to deal with it. The manager tries to explain to the woman that the coupons aren't technically valid as it's for a specific person for 1 bag. Woman keeps pushing on the fact that she physically has the coupons, so they must work, and acts like she doesn't understand why they won't. Eventually, manager says, "You know what, we'll do it, but only for 6 of them." She throws a fit and leaves the entire cart. She could have got 6 bags for free, but nope. Manager said she had seen the woman doing the exact same thing at a Dollar General the day before. Second story, same store. Occasionally, we had a spokesperson for a few brands of dog food come in. Usually weekly, they'd set up a booth at our store, but would do the same at other stores in the area. We had a coupon come out where you could get a $15 box of wet cat food, about 16 cans, for free or pay the difference. She came through with a $30 box, and the cashier caught it and said, "Well, you have to pay the difference or get a box that costs $15. The woman was like, "Oh no, all the other stores let me have it for free. You can do it too." The cashier says, "Nope, that's not how we do it here. You'll have to pay the difference or buy cheaper." The woman demands the manager and gets the general manager, who backs the cashier up. Difference or cheaper? The woman gets huffy and goes and grabs a cheaper box for $25 and expects the cashier to free that out. Cashier is like, no. I guess the woman is either frustrated or embarrassed at this point because when he points out the difference or cheaper thing again, she gets huffy and says, "I'll pay the damn difference." When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all of the stories. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.